me hit record. And when we left each other last class, we were in the throes of talking about our working with real estate agent disclosure. So we want to pick back up there, do a nice quick review. I think this would be a good opportunity to refresh where we left off. Just a few more things to talk about then in Unit 7. And then we will, like I said, move on into Unit 8. So I think the best way to refresh is just to go back and look at the form, because everything we need to know about working with real estate agent disclosures is in the form that the commission provides us as brokers to give to the consumer. So last week we looked at the working with real estate agent disclosure for sellers. Today, we're going to look at the working with real estate agent disclosure for buyer. And as a reminder, I'm in the online learning system and we're right here. Where's my spotlight? We're right here under the Unit 7 material, and this is the working with real estate agent disclosure. So when we're working with buyers, well, first off, shake your heads, yes or no. Is the working with real estate disclosure required for all transactions? Is it required for all of them? ALL? The answer is no. It is only required for sales transactions. That's right. Can you guys even see that? Maybe it'd help if you could see it. There you go. It is only required for sales. This tends to be a problem topic on the test. You see how they like to trick you? Especially for those of you that are going only into sales and don't think about lease transactions. So don't let that little word all trick you. The working with real estate agent is only required for sales transactions. And that does include residential sales and commercial sales. Sales is sales. If you're working with buyers or sellers, the form is required. Again, we have two different forms, one specifically for the seller, the other one specifically for the buyer. This important, guys, this box is labeled important for a reason. It helps us have conversations with the consumer, but hopefully it also helps the consumer draw their attention, draw their eye to this information. So the important information, first off, this is not a contract. I'm not trying to create agency. I just met you. You don't know if you want to hire me. I don't know if I want you to hire me. We just met. So this is not a contract. Working with real estate agent disclosure does not create agency. What creates agency is our agency agreements. And that's where we're heading when we get to Unit 8 in just a second. So this form is not underlined a contract. Signing this disclosure only means you've received it. Then we tell the consumer it's important in a transaction that you understand whether an agent represents you. Is that me? Is that you? Is that agent over there? Doesn't matter. It is important that the consumer understands that they are represented or not. So that's that first bullet point. Real estate agents are required to, everybody see that word required? Does that mean we have an option? Can we choose to do it in a sales transaction? No, required means we're required to review this form with you at first substantial contact. The first substantial contact before asking for or receiving your confidential information. I think it's really important that we understand that this first substantial contact, unfortunately, what makes it so tricky is there's no exact science to it. Because I don't know when I'm going to meet the consumer. Am I going to meet them at an open house? Are they going to meet them because they call me? They do an inquiry on my website. They come up to me in the grocery store because I'm wearing my name badge. I'm getting ready for a listing. I'm getting ready for a buyer consultation. I mean, think of all the scenarios in which you could meet people. And I think that's what makes the first substantial contact so tricky. What we need to understand is that as real estate agents, we need to be on alert for first substantial contact, because it could happen the very first time I talk to you. Remember, we talked last week. You guys know people. People like to talk, don't they? You have a total random stranger come up to you in public and share their life story with you. That's what people do. When they find out you're in real estate, they could come up and share their first substantial contact with you. If I'm preparing for a listing appointment or a buyer consultation, which we'll get more into in Unit 8, but if I'm preparing for those meetings, isn't there a really good chance that at some point in the meeting, I could hit first substantial contact? I mean, how could I get ready for a listing or try to ask a buyer a lot of questions about what they want to buy without hitting that first substantial contact? So I say all that, and there's still scenarios that we haven't even, I mean, we can't possibly come up with all the scenarios. But what we need to understand about this first substantial contact is this is the period of time that the conversation switches gears from the property to the people. When I start learning something substantial about the people in this transaction, now keep in mind, it's got to be transactional related. So if the people talk to me about what they have for lunch or, you know, what their weekend plans are to go to the beach, that kind of thing, that has nothing to do with this transaction, does it? So it's the idea about this transaction, about real estate of that first substantial contact. I think some examples we gave last week were the buyers coming into my open house. You know, just because a buyer walks in the front door doesn't mean I need to bombard them with the working with real estate agent disclosure. I tend to think of buyers as like these skittish little creatures, like these little deer out in the woods, and they scare easy. And if you come to my open house and I say, hey, you got to sign this disclosure, the buyer's like more apt to turn around and run away, right? So we may not always hit first substantial contact in the open house, but we need to be on alert. We may not always hit first substantial contact over a phone call or a website inquiry, but we need to be on alert. If we know we're going to start asking for information, we need to do the working with real estate agent disclosure because we know we're going to hit first substantial contact. So the form reminds us or tells the consumer that we are required to review this with you at first substantial contact and give you a copy after you sign it. This is for your own protection. Again, you guys, the commission doesn't have any rules about how we get a copy. Do you ask the consumer to sign two, one for you, one for them? Do you ask the consumer to sign one and then you take a picture of it with your phone so you have it for your records? There's no wrong way to do that. But at the end, once they sign it, you need a copy and they need a copy as well. We'll talk again about our Q&A brochure, just another piece of literature that we want to make sure we put in their hands to help them better understand this agency. What questions do I have on first substantial contact? Okay, let's see. The third bullet point says, do not, again, there's another underline, do not share any confidential information with the agent. Okay, let's make sure we understand that. You know, if I'm already working with a buyer or seller, obviously part of the form is to, you know, stop, I represent the buyer, I represent the seller, and allows me to have the conversation with them. But the big part of this form is to make sure whether I represent anybody or not, do not share confidential information with an agent. Does that say me? Does that say, you know, with any agent, with a agent? Let's make sure, again, we're good with that. Don't share confidential information with a real estate agent. That's not specific to me, is it? That's me, that's you, that's any agent out there. So we're warning the consumers. Remember, we're going to Mirandarize them. Anything you say can be held against you. So make sure that they understand that they don't share confidential information or assume that the agent is acting on your behalf until you have entered into an agency agreement. Otherwise, the agent can share your confidential information with others. That third bullet point is what we really need to try to get across, what we really need to make sure. Again, if you're already back to the scenario, you're doing an open house. It's clear to you and me that you represent the seller. It may not be clear to the buyer. And that's the other piece of it. If we're already representing somebody in this transaction, we need to make sure we know that. But the second piece of this is to make sure that they understand that we don't owe them that confidentiality. Question comes in, buyer lives out of state and calls about a property. Could you send via email? And would email signature suffice? Great question. And the answer is absolutely. Again, delivery doesn't method just so long as we get it in the consumer's hand. So if first substantial contact happens over the phone or on the website, we still have the conversation. We still discuss it with them. But now we have, does anybody remember how many days we have to deliver the working with real estate agent disclosure? And I see fingers going up. Good, good, good. So, right, if first substantial contact doesn't happen face to face, then we're still going to review it with them. We're still going to have the conversation, but we have 3 days to get it in their hands. We've decided in this class, as we said several times, I can't make anybody do anything, can I? Unfortunately, I've yet to figure out how to make people do stuff. I'm trying. If they refuse to sign, can I put the pen in their hand and force them to sign this piece of paper? You will. No. If they say, I'm not going to sign this, then we actually write, this person on this date refused to sign, and that's what goes in our transactional file, and then we proceed. If they don't sign this, we can still talk to them, we can still work with them, because we're not creating agency. Is everybody good with this? I'm not trying to create agency. I'm disclosing my agency status. So if they don't sign this, okay, look, it's not a contract. I'm not trying to commit them to anything. I'm just trying to get them to sign saying that they have received it. After the important, I'm going to break this down a little bit. Then we're told, note to agent, check all relationship types below that may apply to this buyer. Again, words mean everything. So anything below that may apply to this buyer. And then what we have is like a menu, if you will. And the menu is what the firm will offer. Remember last week we talked about different types of agency. There's single agency, there's dual agency, designated dual agency, seller sub-agency in the case of working with buyers. If your firm doesn't practice seller sub-agency, don't check that box. If your firm doesn't practice designated dual agency, don't check that box. Again, I'm not creating agency. I'm not dictating our relationship. I'm simply telling you what my firm has to offer. So if we think of this as a menu, you guys ever go out to eat and you look at the menu and the restaurant tells you what you have to choose from, right? That's what the menu is. These are the options you have. And that's what we're doing as agents. We're telling the consumer, these are the options you have. Maybe you can work with me as a buyer agent, dual agent, whatever your firm's policy is. Again, I'll let you guys look at this. It kind of breaks down for the consumer the specifics about the different types of agency that the firm may offer. Note to buyer for more information on an agent's duties and services. They're referencing the buyer to the Q&A brochure. We'll see that again in just a second. I got a place for 2 buyers to sign. And then you're going to print your name, license number, and the firm name. That's for their reference. Remember, we're both getting a copy of this, ourselves and the consumer. If they refuse to sign, then just write that on here and proceed. Guys, a lot of meeting consumers and the beginning stages of our agency is about building trust, building that relationship and that repertoire. And it's kind of hard to trust somebody when I just handed you a piece of paper and said, don't tell me anything confidential, isn't it? it kind of puts people on guard. So they may not be willing to sign this, and that's okay. If they're not, then we write refuse to sign, and then we proceed. We don't have to stop working with them if they don't sign this. We proceed, and in time, we will earn their trust. Maybe we can try to get them to sign later before they sign the offer to purchase or something, but we want that documentation that we presented it. We attempted to share it with them, to discuss it with them, but they just didn't want to put pen to paper and sign the disclosure. So we just want to acknowledge that. Refuse to sign as much information as you want. Again, there are no rules. I tend to put the date, the name, refuse to sign, just for my records. But again, there are no rules on that. You could just write refuse to sign. Questions on the disclosure, the working with real estate agent disclosure. The other thing we looked at before we left was this Q&A brochure. This is also in your book as well, reprinted in your book, probably about page 167, 169, somewhere in there. Or you can pull it up. This should both be the same, because this is a fairly new form, by the way. We just got our new disclosure 2 years ago. It was a big upgrade. We were very happy. So the Q&A brochure, again, you can get the actual nice glossy brochure. Costs money, looks nice. You could be frugal like me and get the flat PDF, not have to pay anything for it. All this is available at the commission's website. Your firm obviously will provide this information for you as well. I think I shared with you guys last week, back in my administrative days, I did a lot of new agent training. So I got you guys as soon as you got your license. And probably the number one question I got was, what do I say? When I meet somebody for the first time, how do I know what to say? And that's why we have these brochures. That's why we have these tools to help us put words in our mouth. And if we're familiar with the forms, don't read it to them. But if we're familiar with the forms, then we can be able to explain this, have a conversation, and help them understand agency to build that trust and to feel comfortable with us later on. So being familiar with the forms, this Q&A brochure kind of breaks it down into working with sellers, working with buyers, what is agency, how do we terminate agency, that kind of thing. So it's another good tool for you guys as we're finishing up Unit 7 to help you revisit the things that we've talked about. Another good opportunity for you guys to wrap your brains around all this material. So question comes in, revisiting sub-agency, what is their role? It says on the form, an unrepresented buyer. That's exactly right. Remember, in seller sub-agency, the buyer is the customer. The buyer is the customer. So if the firm offers seller sub-agency, remember, not all firms allow it, but if your firm offers seller sub-agency, then that may be an option that we can give to the buyer. And basically what we're telling the buyer in this case is you have two choices. You either hire me or you don't. I can still help you through the transaction. Do you want to hire me or not? Remember our pictures? I'm a big fan of pictures. And when we talked about seller sub-agency, we had the buyer standing over there all by himself. Everybody was on one side of the line. And then the buyer was standing over here all by themselves. And that's what it means to be unrepresented. You don't have anybody on the line, your side with you. Keisha, I'll get there. I might address that in just a second, actually. So yeah, hang on. Good. So the Q&A brochure, again, this is the flat PDF because I'm frugal. But if you want to buy, and I don't know how much they are, but you could, or your firm could, go to the commission's website and buy the nice glossy things. The content is the same, the wording is the same, but one thing that we have in the brochure that we don't have on the flat PDF, and I wanted to share it with you guys because I do think it's important, that if and when you get your hands on that brochure, you're going to see pictures. They include pictures to help the consumer better understand agency. So since we're not looking at the brochure, again, I still wanted to provide this with you guys, so you can see the pictures. So buyer and seller agency up there in the top left, see how broker A and broker B are two different colors? That's indicating they're different firms. Broker A works for Red Realty, broker B works for Blue Realty. And in buyer agency and seller agency, broker A is holding their buyer, broker B is holding their seller. This is a co-op transaction, cooperative transaction. There are two different firms involved, and both buyer and seller have exclusive representation because they chose to go with two different firms in this transaction. Over on the top right, then we have dual agency. Now we have both brokers working with the Red Realty, don't we? All the same firm. What do we remember about dual agency? Show me, how many firms is dual agency? How many firms? Just one. How many transactions? Just one. And how many clients? Clients. Two clients. How many customers in dual agency? Zero. Look at you guys. So basic breakdown in dual agency: one firm, one transaction, two clients. Maybe it's one agent, maybe it's two. The example of dual agency is two agents is the top right. The example of dual agency with one agent is the bottom left. You guys see that? We not only are holding the hands of our buyers or sellers, but in the top right, we're also holding hands together. Because remember, dual agency is about the firm. Everybody always remember that. Agency relationships, particularly dual agency. If we're in dual agency, it's because the firm is in dual agency. If the firm offers it, we can offer the buyer and the seller designated dual agency. We're still with the same firm, right? But now those two agents are no longer holding hands. Those two agents kind of look like the top left, don't they? They're representing their buyers and sellers as if they were with two different firms. One has been kicked off the wall to work exclusively with the buyer, and another one has been kicked off the wall to work exclusively with the seller. We're still the same firm, but we've been designated, one to work exclusively with the buyer, another one to work exclusively with the seller. Please remember, in designated dual agency does not go away. So if this were our wall, we would still have the firm and all the other agents straddling the wall. It's just two agents have been kicked off, one to work exclusively with the buyer and another work exclusively with the seller. Do we like the pictures? I like the pictures. They added, I'm telling you, okay, let me just share this with you real quick. The working with real estate agent disclosure that we had prior to the update too, maybe it'll be 3 years this year, but it's 2 or 3 years ago, was awful. It was not easy. Working with real estate agents was complicated. It was not a good time. And then they updated it. And whenever they updated it, you might have heard a collective woohoo from across the entire state of North Carolina. And that was all of us brokers celebrating these new forms. The disclosure is much better, the Q&A, the pictures, a much better job to provide us tools to help us explain it to the consumer. I'm telling you guys, working with real estate agent disclosure, once you get your license, it takes time, it takes practice. The first couple times you present your disclosure with the consumer, it's going to be awkward. And you're going to be something like, disclosure, no confidentiality. And you're going to just kind of spit out what you know. But in time, you'll get better. You'll kind of form your elevator speech, you know? So in time, you'll be able to know what to say, how to say it, so it doesn't sound like you're brand new and you don't know what you're doing yet. Carry these things around too. I have these things in my trunk. Of course, I have my phone ready to go at all times. You never know when that first substantial contact's going to hit. I think one thing that could help you guys better understand this, maybe some of you have already done it. Has anybody gone over the working with real estate agent disclosure yet with your family? Have you guys, have you? Good, good. Go over it, present it to your family. Pretend that you just met them for the first time and you're hitting first substantial contact. And if you go through it with them and they say, okay, that makes sense, you did good. If you go through it with your family and they say, what in the heck are you talking about? You need to go back and revisit it again. But they're a great place to start. Get your family involved. They need to be, so get them involved now. Anybody got your family helping you study? Going over flashcards, asking you questions? Yeah, make sure you take them out for a nice dinner when you get your license, because they too are working hard to help you. So this idea for substantial contact, this is most of the time when we meet somebody new, a new consumer. Again, no matter how we meet them, but when we meet somebody new, the rules may change just a bit if we meet somebody new and we are already in an agency relationship. So when it comes to specifically this transaction in which you've already been hired, there's a couple different commission rules, and I got them referenced here for you. If you're meeting a prospective buyer or seller for the first time, you're hoping to get the listing, you're hoping to get the buyer. You meet a prospective buyer or seller for the first time, the rules say that we have to do our disclosure no later than first substantial contact, FSC, first substantial contact. If you've already been hired as a seller's agent, you are currently acting as a listing agent. This takes us back to our open house scenario. You've already been hired as a listing agent, a potential buyer or their agent contacts you. We've got to disclose our status no later than first substantial contact. Again, just because a buyer comes into my open house does not mean I need to do the agency disclosure. But when that buyer comes into my open house, I need to be on alert. I need to pay attention in case we hit first substantial contact. If the buyer comes in and talks about the weather and baseball, I have no reason to do first substantial contact. If they come in and tell me their motivation for buying, any terms that they're willing to buy under, or what price they're willing to pay, then that's the first substantial contact. We need to be on alert. This last one is where it gets just a little different. This last one says if you've already been hired as a buyer's agent, a buyer has hired you and you are working on behalf of them. When you first contact a seller or a seller's agent, we need to disclose our status of being a buyer's agent, not at first substantial contact, but at initial contact. Initial contact is, hi, my name is Julie, and I'm working as a buyer's agent. We don't wait for that idea for substantial contact. Good morning. I think this could look one of two ways. Typically, not always, again, there's no fine science to this, but typically as buyer's agents, the first time we're going to reach out to the seller or the seller's agent is when your buyer is interested in seeing that listing. So your buyer calls you, another firm has something listed, they call you and they say, we want to see this, 2 o'clock this afternoon. You say, great. Most of us across the state have a centralized showing service, which means we have one place that we can log in and schedule all of our showings. We don't have to contact each individual firm to schedule the showing. Just one place we can go schedule everything. And when you go into the centralized showing service and you're scheduling the showing appointment on behalf of your buyer, you have to choose your agency status. Are you a buyer's agent or are you a seller sub-agent? So you select, you check a box and it actually selects your agency status. When you make the request to show, that request goes to the listing agent and the seller. So they get an email or a text or a phone call that says, Julie Campbell, comma, buyer's agent, comma, wants to show your property today at 2 o'clock. When did I disclose my status? Initial contact. I want to see your house today at 2 o'clock. Did we hit anything substantial yet? So what? Maybe we're just nosy neighbors and we want to see it. Doesn't mean we're interested. So the showing system handles that for us. But what about another scenario? What if you've been hired as a buyer's agent and they want to see it today at the listing today at 2 o'clock? And they say, but before we see it, we have a couple questions. Do you mind reaching out to the seller and asking some questions for us? Absolutely. What are your questions? So now I contact the seller or the seller's agent, seller being a for sale by owner. Otherwise, we're going to communicate directly with their agent. And we say, pick up the phone, you call them, they answer, and you say, my name is Julie Campbell. I'm with firm XYZ, and I'm working with a buyer that's interested in your property. They want to see it today at 2, but first they have questions. When did I disclose that I'm working with a buyer? When did I disclose that I'm representing a buyer? I didn't even give them a chance to talk, did I? I disclosed my status as soon as I put my name out, because that's a proper order, right? If I called you and said buyer's agent, comma, Julie Campbell, you'd be like, so I think, it's okay to give your name first, but then you need to say, I'm working with a buyer. So this idea of initial contact is when we've already been hired as a buyer's agent and we're reaching out to a seller or a seller's agent on their behalf. Questions? Again, don't forget Commission Rule A.0104 is loaded in our Campbell folder in the online learning system. So please make sure you're reading that numerous of times. Everything you've ever wanted to know about agency, well, not really, but a good place to get started is Commission Rule A.0104 in the Campbell folder. Another thing about disclosures, and I need everybody to listen to me. There is an exception to this rule. And the exception is in the event of an auction sales. And this is what I need you guys to hear. I want you all to pretend like auction sales don't exist unless you are specifically asked about auction sales. So if the question never says anything about auction sales, then you don't worry about it. If the question doesn't bring it up, then you all don't go down the what if trail and bring it up. Is everybody with me? The only time you need to think about, even consider auction sales is if the question specifically asks about it. Auctions are a totally different beast. They are the exception to the norm. They're handled differently. We're going to talk a little bit more about auction sales in Unit 10, but all in all in this class on auction sales, we got like 2 slides on it. So how important is auction sales for your exams? I'm going to say 2 brief things about it. Are they important? Not really. Don't even think about them. Pretend that they don't even exist unless you're specifically asked about them. Do I have everybody so far? Okay. If you're asked about auction sales, the working with real estate agent disclosure is not required. The seller in an auction is going to be represented by the auctioneer that is also a real estate agent. They have a real estate license. Again, talking a little bit more about that in Unit 10. And in that scenario, for some reason, it is presumed that when a buyer comes to a real estate auction, they know that the auctioneer represents the seller. And so because of that presumption, we do not have to do the disclosure in auction sales. Now, if you're the buyer's agent and you're representing the buyer, if you're taking your buyer to an auction, we should have already done that, right? Because we had that conversation when we first met the buyer. This is specifically about the auctioneer not needing to do the disclosure to the buyer or their agent. Questions about working with real estate agent disclosure? We have another unique situation that could come up in a sales transaction. Again, this tends to be a problem topic, so please hear me out. We'll have plenty of time for questions in just a second. The Real Estate Commission gives us the opportunity to work with a buyer and a tenant at first under an oral buyer agency agreement. This applies to buyer. This could also apply to tenants. So let's understand a few things having this conversation. One thing we're going to learn in Unit 8 is that I cannot perform a single service for an owner of a property without first getting my agency agreement in writing. And when I say owner, I'm referring to a seller in a for sale situation. I'm referring to an owner in a property management situation. If they hire me to be the property manager. So any owner, I cannot perform a single service for an owner without first getting my agency agreement signed. So the exception is when we're working with buyers, again, and possibly tenants. Remember, we just said some buyers are like these scared, timid little creatures. And you just met me, and all of a sudden I'm handing you a contract saying, I need you to sign this. I need you to sign this. And the buyer may get a little hesitant. They may say, ooh, I don't know. I just met you. I'm not even sure if I can trust you yet. I get it. It's fair. Guys, remember, buyers are consumers. We are all consumers. So you do your working with real estate agent disclosure. The buyer wants to hire you, but they're not ready to sign an agency agreement yet. Commission rule allows me to proceed under an oral buyer agency agreement. Cover up the word oral real quick. Pretend that word oral doesn't exist. What does this say? Buyer agency. Please understand, an oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. Did everybody hear me? An oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. They have hired me. They just haven't done it in writing yet. Why don't you guys remind me in the chat, when a consumer hires me, what do I owe them? When a consumer hires me, we talked about several different duties, several different things. And when a consumer hires me, what do I owe them? Yeah, a lot of you are spelling it out. I think the easiest way to remember what I owe the consumer is OCAR. So in an oral buyer agency agreement, what do I owe this buyer? I owe them OCAR. So how can this be? We're in an oral agreement. We don't have a agency agreement, a written agency agreement, I should say. So how is it that I owe them OLCAR in an oral buyer agency agreement? Because it is an agency agreement. Remember, we talked about express versus implied. Express means all the terms have been clearly stated. Maybe we do so in writing, maybe we do so orally. So even though it's oral, it still needs to be express, which means we're not asking them to sign an agency agreement yet, but we're still explaining what it means for me to be your agent. We're still talking about the duties that I owe you. We're still talking about our relationship. We still talk about dual agency. I can have an oral yes to dual agency when I'm working with an oral buyer. So even though it's oral at first, it's still express, meaning the terms have been clearly stated. Commission rule says that I can work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. The latest I have to put that relationship, to put that agreement in writing, is before I present the offer on behalf of my buyer. I cannot present an offer on behalf of my buyer without first getting a written buyer agency agreement. So oral buyer agency is buyer agency. I owe them OLCAR. Under oral buyer agency, what do you think they owe me? Do they owe me commission in an oral agreement? Nah, I can't take that to court, can I? We got a handshake agreement. Can't take that to court. What's the judge going to say? If you want to get paid, they're going to say, you need to have it in writing. And that's why commission rule requires us to put our oral buyer agency agreement in writing before we present the offer on their behalf, so we can protect our commission, so we can have their agreement, their end of the deal as well. Please note that word, presenting the offer. Again, I think where they like to, I hate to say that they like to trick you, but I think where they like to trick you is you may have a question answer that says before writing the offer. Writing the offer and presenting the offer are two different things. Writing the offer means I'm filling in the blank. I'm helping the buyer decide what they want to offer, what they want their fees to be, their deposits to be. I'm talking about all that in Unit 10. When I'm writing the offer, I'm filling the blanks in on behalf of my buyer. Once I complete the offer, I send it to my buyer to sign it. They sign the offer, and then I present the offer on their behalf, which means I contact the seller or the listing agent and present that offer on their behalf. So oral buyer agency must be express, which means the terms have been clearly stated. It must be that we put this oral buyer agency agreement in writing before we present the offer on their behalf. There are a couple caveats to oral buyer agency. I cannot demand exclusivity. Let's talk about what we mean by this word exclusive. We've started to see it. We're going to see it more and more. Let's talk about what we mean by this word exclusive. Let me ask you guys a question. If you are dating somebody exclusively, how many people should you be dating? Should you be dating? Just one. Women tend to answer that faster than men. I don't really know why. But how many people in an exclusive relationship? We should only be dating one person. Everybody agree with me there? So let's take that relationship and talk about terms in real estate. In an exclusive agency agreement, it means that the client, the buyer or the seller can only date one firm. That's what it means to be exclusive. The client can only date one firm. So an oral buyer agency is a non-exclusive relationship. And in a non-exclusive relationship, how many people can you date? as many as you want, right? The buyer's out there playing the field. They're dating many, many, many firms. We cannot demand exclusivity in an oral buyer agency. This is another one of these where I fear sometimes you get in your own way. Some agents choose not to work under an oral buyer agency agreement. Some firms choose not to work under an oral buyer agency agreement. Once again, your test is not going to ask you what you're going to do. Your test is going to ask you what you can do. Can you work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first? And the answer is yes. You just cannot demand exclusivity. Understand too that exclusivity is just a one-way street. If we're in an exclusive agency agreement, the client can only date one firm. The firm can date as many clients as they want. Let's see, Julie's Real Estate Shop, you all work for me. There are 38 of you. It'd be really hard for us to make money if we could only have one of you working with one buyer or one of you working with one seller. If I could only have one transaction going on at the same time, right? How do we make money? Because all of you have something listed or all of you have a buyer. Does this make sense? And that's why exclusivity, bless you. This is why exclusivity is a one-way street. Everybody good so far? Thumbs ups? Exclusivity is a one-way street. And in an oral agreement, it's non-exclusive, which means the buyer can date as many firms as they want. If we attempt to demand exclusivity, then we got to put our oral agreement in writing. So if you're that agent or that firm that's not going to do oral buyer agency, that means you need to get your buyer agency agreement in writing before you proceed. The other caveat, in an oral buyer agency agreement, we cannot bind the buyer for a specific period of time. In an oral agreement, I can't say you're going to work with me for a week or a month or a year. If we're going to attempt to bind, then we have got to put this in writing. So commission rule says we can proceed, we can work under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. The latest possible time to put that thing in writing is before I present an offer on their behalf. But if I demand exclusivity or if I attempt to bind them for a period of time, then we have to put it in writing before we present the offer. So oral buyer agency, again, I can have a yes to oral dual agency as well. We can have an oral yes to dual. There's a couple of scenarios in your book that are a little misleading. I know I had you cross one out last week. There's another one we're getting ready to look at as well, just because they're misleading, and I will address them in just a second because I want to make sure that we're clear and that we can identify what's misleading about it. So we've got a little bit more to say about oral buyer agency. Don't go anywhere just yet. I just wanted to show you in our online learning system, I actually have a sample oral buyer agency letter. Even though this is in oral, our oral buyer agency agreement is not in writing. It's still express, which means we still have to explain what it means for me to be your agent. And that's what that letter does. Wouldn't this be a good example of documentation? If you have a conversation face-to-face with a buyer about what it means for me to be your agent, don't you think that's a good conversation to document? Yes, I explained it to them. Yes, I had a conversation. Yes, we went over dual agency. And one way that you can document the conversation is by, for example, providing something like an oral buyer agency letter. And you can see the terms of our agreement with you are as follows. I will act as a buyer's agent for you on your behalf. I will assist you in locating and buying property. Our oral agreement will continue until either one of us notifies the other that it's terminated or an agency agreement is created. We tell them it's non-exclusive. I'll show you any properties where they're offering me commission. Since they don't owe me commission yet, if we come across a property that isn't willing to pay me, a seller that isn't willing to pay me, then we may need to get that buyer agency agreement in writing, because they don't owe me compensation under an oral buyer agency agreement. If you become interested in a property, then we need to further address our agreement on how I would be paid for assisting you. If we become interested in a property with dual agency and designated dual agency, it touches on that. You understand other buyers represented by our firm may seek the same property, submit offers, etc. That's covered in our buyer's agency agreement as well. And then notice at the bottom, who signs that? We do, don't we? Is there anywhere on there asking the buyer to sign that? No, because I'm not asking them to put our agency agreement in writing. This is just a tool for me to use to help explain this to him, to have that express oral buyer agency agreement. The terms have been clearly stated. And again, if that conversation happens face to face, you're gonna want to document it. If you don't want to use the form, that's fine. Go home and send an email per our conversation. This is what buyer agency looks like. I look forward to working with you. Have a nice day. So again, I put this in here just to help us better understand that oral buyer agency. There's a few other things about oral buyer agency I want to say, but we do need to take a break. And of course, then I'll absolutely open it up for questions. So let's go ahead and take our break for 10 minutes. You guys know what I mean. And we come back, we'll keep talking about oral buyer agency. that. Cameras are on. So I am taking attendance. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this oral buyer agency thing. We mentioned earlier, when working with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement, we can also work with that buyer if they want dual agency. We can get a yes to dual orally when we are working with that buyer in an oral buyer agency agreement. Most of the time with buyers, we generally don't need to get into a lengthy discussion about dual agency until and if the situation arises. So you may work with a buyer, you mentioned dual agency, and then they want to start seeing listings, but anything they want to see, nothing they want to see is listed by your firm. So we don't have a possibility for dual agency, right? We could be out with them for weeks, maybe even months. I don't know how many listings your firm's going to have, but it might be if you guys only have one or two, it might be that you never bump into the possibility of dual agency. So again, when we meet this buyer, we're going to discuss it with them. We're going to have a brief conversation. Our working with real estate agent disclosure allows us to do that. A sample buyer agency agreement allows us to do that. The big conversation comes up when all of a sudden they're interested in seeing something that your firm has listed. Everybody with me? You could be with them for months before this ever happens. Mention it at first, but don't do a full-blown discussion until and if needed. I've been working with this buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement for, I don't know, 4 weeks. Never had the possibility of dual agency because they've never wanted to see anything that my firm has listed. 4 weeks into it, lo and behold, my firm put something new on the market and this oral buyer wants to see it. Now we need to have the big hard conversation about dual agencies. Everybody with me so far? Before I get them in the front door, because we need to make sure they're on board if they want to later present the offer. We can have an oral yes to dual. And when it's oral, they can change their mind orally, right? So if they first say no orally, and then their dream home is listed by your firm, we can get them to change their mind. We got to revisit it. We got to remind them. We got to have a conversation with them again because they don't remember when we talked about it 4 weeks ago. As we said earlier, owners, we cannot proceed with working with the owner, may that be in a for sale or a for lease situation, without having that agency agreement in writing. So sellers, owners, we got to get them to say yes or no to dual in writing from the onset. If the seller changes their mind on dual agency, the only way they can change their mind is in writing. Because, for example, they've already said no in writing, and now they want to change their mind. The only way that they can change their mind is if they change it to yes in writing. Once it's in writing, the only way to change it is in writing. And guys, that's basic contract law. You go to Google, don't, but if you go to Google and look up Contract Law 101, that's going to be one of the first things that comes up. Basic contract law says if it's in writing, it can only be changed in writing. With that being said, please flip with me back to page 162 real quick. On page 162, I asked you guys to cross out situation 2. Does everybody have that crossed out? Cross out situation 2, because that gives the erroneous impression that the seller can change their mind orally. But we just decided that they can't because they are already in writing. So situation number 2 is misleading because of that. Now skip ahead with me to page 176. On page 176, you guys see the second problem there? Number 2, cross it out. It gives that same impression that's not the case. And I don't want there to be any confusion about this. So cross out number 2 as well on page 176. If the seller says no in writing, the only way to change that is for us to go in and edit the agency agreement. The only way to change that is for us to make that change in writing. So when we talk about changing orally, this is only going to apply to the oral buyer and an oral buyer agency agreement. Pages 176, number 2, and 162, number 2. 162 and 176. Yep. 162 and 176. So back to Lakeisha. Did that address your question? Perfect. Good for you for having a little red flag go up. Is that what happened? Did your little red flag go up? Good for you. Okay, so oral buyer agency is a buyer agency agreement. Does everybody hear me? An oral buyer agency, I owe them OCAR. Why? Because it's express. Express means that the terms have been clearly stated. Guys, remember, implied agency is never allowed, ever allowed, which means I just can't start acting like your agent without first having a conversation about what that means. And that's what we're doing with express. I'm not asking the buyer to sign an agency agreement yet. Hopefully I'm building their trust. I'm forming this relationship so they will want to sign an agency agreement. So this oral buyer agency, we have to reduce it to writing before we present the offer. Understand, I cannot present the offer as a buyer's agent without having it in writing. Do I have it? I'm sorry, without having it in writing. I cannot present the offer as a buyer's agent without having it in writing. So now let's get into the what ifs. What if? I hear you. What if you wrote this offer up, you have the buyer sign it, and you're about to present it, and they say, nope, I'm not going to sign an agency agreement. Again, can I make anybody do anything? Unfortunately, no. I don't know why they're not willing to sign it. Obviously, you haven't built that trust. You haven't built that relationship. I think that's a pretty good reason why. So you're ready to present the offer, and your buyer says, no, I'm not going to sign it. If they refuse to sign it, then I cannot proceed with this buyer as my client. I cannot present an offer on a buyer's behalf without having that agency agreement in writing. And if they refuse to sign it, I may make some suggestions. For example, if this buyer refuses to sign it, obviously I want to try to get to the bottom of it, right? Ask some questions like, can I ask why you're hesitant to sign it, for example? When we meet our buyer agency agreement in Unit 8, we're going to see that we have a place on the agency agreement that we could potentially create buyer's agency just for one address. So if they're not willing to enter into you with a written buyer agency agreement, maybe we can get them to get into a written buyer agency agreement just for 123 Main Street, so I can present their offer. And if 123 Main Street closes, I got you, you're represented. If it doesn't, we're back to our oral buyer agency agreement, right? So that would be our first attempt, would be to try to get that thing in writing just for one address. That one address you want to present the offer on their behalf. The last ditch effort, and I'm telling you right now, the commission frowns upon it. It's not illegal. You're not going to go to real estate jail if as long as you handle it right. But the last ditch effort would be to offer to downgrade that buyer from first class to coach. We could offer that buyer, fine, you don't want to be you don't want me to be my client, you don't want to sign the agency agreement. What if I downgrade you? What if I downgrade you from a client to a customer? Before we make that switch though, first off, we need to make sure that the listing firm and the seller will allow it. We need to make sure that they have agreed to allow that seller sub-agency. But the thing that we need to carefully have the conversation with about this buyer, if I downgrade them and they become my customer, whose side of the wall do I now go stand on? Now I go stand on the seller side of the wall, don't I? And who gets the information? Who gets my loyalty? Who gets it all? Is it no longer the buyer? It's now the seller. And that buyer needs to understand, if I know something about you, price, term, or motive, who do I have to share that with now? The seller. Can we see why the commission frowns on this? I think bottom line, again, I think it comes back to us as agents. And if we're properly explaining agency up front with our agency disclosure, why the heck wouldn't they want to hire me? Why the heck would they want to go through unrepresented, right? In this case, that buyer needs to clearly understand, I'm making that switch. You said you wanted to hire me, you weren't willing to sign anything, and that's fine. I can't make you do anything, that's fine. But now we're at the place where you have to sign in order for us to proceed as you being my client. And if they say no, guys, my only other option is for you to be my customer. As an agent, I only have two options to work with you. Either you're my client or you're my customer. We have no other legal alternatives. So if they say, no, I'm not going to sign it, and no, I don't want to be downgraded. No, I don't want to be put in coach when I bought a first class ticket. We're done. We have no other legal alternative. We cannot proceed. Client and customer are our only options. So as a last ditch effort, again, try to get to the bottom of it. Why won't you sign it? Would you be willing to sign an agency agreement just for this one address? Try to get to the bottom of it. And if they still say no, we can offer this as hear me when I say a last ditch effort. And we've got to proceed with caution. Make sure they understand what they're giving up by becoming your customer. And if that conversation happens face-to-face or over the phone, are you going to go home and follow it up with an email about what it means to become my customer, to be downgraded from a client to customer? Are you going to follow that up with an email? I should see heads adamantly shaking yes, because you want the documentation that you explain that to them, that you explained that you're now on the side of the seller, that you owe those duties to the seller. I can now present the offer with you being my customer, because that's what's in the best interest of my seller, getting that seller under contract and getting a property to close. Question come in. Have I had this issue? I have not. I've been very fortunate. I've worked as an oral buyer agent numerous of times. And again, I think sometimes it comes down to just building that trust. We were out enough, we spent enough time together. I think they realize that I do have their best interest. I am acting as their fiduciary. I think part of the reason why the commission frowns upon this so much is because they don't want this being our norm. They don't want this to be how we conduct our business. So they don't want us to not try to get the buyer to hire us, just proceed as an oral buyer agent, and then just say, oh, well, okay, here's the option, because we didn't do a good job up front explaining what that means for me to be your agent. Let the forms, disclosures, and agency agreements help you put words in your mouth. If they say no to being my client, if they say no to being my customer, I'm out. We're done. I have no other legal alternative in which I can work with you. Questions on this? And then I've had some, I think, was it my very first buyer? It was my second buyer ever. I was on office duty. I was taking turns, we all take turns answering the phone, sitting at the front desk, some offices, some firms. So I was on office duty and the phone rang, And the lady on the other end of the phone said, I'm interested in buying a house and this is what I'm looking for. And I said, whoa, stop talking. And we did our disclosure. And she said, so we made an appointment for her to come meet me like tomorrow or the next day or whatever, so we could get started and get her to a lender and all that good stuff. And then she said, just go ahead and bring the paperwork that you need to make you my agent so I can go ahead and sign it. And I thought, well, dang, that was easy. This is my second buyer. They don't always work like that. But obviously she bought a house or two before, right? She knew the game. She knew what she was doing. And as I learned in working with her, she did. She had bought numerous properties before. But yeah, she said, just go ahead and bring whatever paperwork you need to make you my agent. All I did was answer the phone. Like, sweet. Sometimes they fall in your lap. Sometimes they don't. Here's that oral dual agency. I apologize, I didn't realize I had a slide, but this is that oral dual agency we were just talking about. Can change orally only if we have an oral yes or no. If that yes or no is in writing, the only way to change it is in writing. And that's why I don't want you guys now knowing what you know. You may want to look at 176 and 162, number 2 and number 2. If it's misleading, then don't look at it. Get your Sharpie and completely block it out so you don't even have to be bothered with it. Basic contract law says, once we have an agreement in writing, the only way to change it is in writing. There's your law school 101 for the day. Questions? Oral buyer agency, oral dual agency. The last little piece of Unit 7 is just talking about the nature of the brokerage business. We're going to talk more about the BIC and the PB and the different categories and everything when we get to license law and commission rule. Please remember to be looking at those comments on the license law and commission rule. Each office location has a broker in charge. General rule of thumb says you got a BIC under each roof. So if your firm has 5 different office locations, how many BICs are you going to have? You're going to have 5 BICs, aren't you? 1 under each roof. 5 offices, 5 BICs. The broker in charge is the one that's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the office. And one of the broker in charge's biggest responsibility is soon to be you guys, my provisional brokers. I call you guys my brokers with training wheels. Once you get your license, you can ride your bike, but you can't do it without your training wheels yet. So as a provisional broker, your broker in charge is fully responsible for you. If the provisional broker gets themselves in the trouble with the real estate commission, they will take their BIC down with them. The broker in charge is also responsible for the actions and activities of the unlicensed employees. You very well may have administrative staff that doesn't have a license. The BIC is responsible. We're going to talk about their duties, what they can and can't do when we get to the comments. The BIC is responsible for some activities of the full broker. So as a PB, your BIC is in your back pocket. Once you drop that provisional status, you've knocked your training wheels off, and now you can ride your bike alone as a full broker. But there's still some things that the BIC is responsible for. For example, making sure that every agent in the office properly handles agency, making sure that we have our working with real estate agent disclosures, making sure that all agency agreements are signed and properly filled out. So as a PB, your BIC is in your back pocket. As a broker, you have some more flexibility, but your BIC is still responsible for some of the actions of the office. Do they offer training? What training do they offer? Always remember, every firm is different. Every broker is different. Talking more about the BIC and the PB, but one of the bigger distinctions between the sales associate and the admin, now we're talking about the employee versus the independent contractor. Sales associates are going to be down as the independent contractor. And there's two main differences between the employee and the independent contractor. And one of those differences is how we're paid. So the employee is going to get, at the end of the year, they're going to get a W-2. Their taxes are going to be withheld from their paycheck. As an independent contractor, we get a 1099. Taxes are not withheld. I feel the need to say that again. As an independent contractor, taxes are not withheld. Do you get a 1099? When you file your taxes at the end of the year, though, guess what? Uncle Sam is standing there with his hand out, looking at the independent contractor going, we had a great year. You now owe me taxes. So taxes aren't withheld from each check. They're paid at the end of the year. Is anybody currently being paid a 1099? Anybody currently acting as an independent contractor being paid a 1099? Just a few of you. Has anybody ever been a 1099 independent contractor? Not many of you. Okay. My suggestion, my advice, particularly, especially your first year in sales, get you a good accountant, because that accountant can help you figure out how much of your commission do you need to set aside to be prepared to pay those taxes at the end of the year. Plus, a good accountant can also help you know what things are tax deductions, what things could be tax breaks. So as an independent contractor, you might be able to write off mileage and advertising, things like that we do to conduct our business. So I highly recommend your first year in sales, at least your first year in sales, that you guys talk to a good accountant so you're not blindsided at the end of the year. So many times agents get to their end of their first year and they've spent all their money. And then Uncle Sam says, you owe me X amount. And I say, well, that's not fair. Why is that? Because he wasn't collecting throughout the year. Does this make sense? That's a huge difference in a 1099 and a W-2. The employee is paid salary or hourly, X amount per hour or X amount per year. The independent contractor is commission basis. We get paid when it closes. Talking more and more about your commission as we get into Unit 8. The employee is told what to do, when to do it. They punch a clock, right? Log in at 9, go to lunch from 12 to 1, leave at 5. The independent contractor, the BIC may have firm policies, office policies about things that we need to do, but they really don't have, as an independent contractor, particularly as a full broker, they really don't have that power. Because as an independent contractor, who do I work for? I work for me. I am my boss. We affiliate with our firms. As an independent contractor, that broker in charge is not hiring me unless I'm employed. As an independent contractor, we're affiliated. I don't know if you guys have started thinking about firms, thinking about what you want to do when you get your license. I do think it's good to dream. I also think it's good that you guys remember not put your cart in front of your horse, right? Before you can go out and go sell lots and lots of houses, you first got to get your license. But when you start thinking about firms, I highly, highly recommend you talk to 2, if not 3, before you decide who you want to affiliate with. And the reason I say that is because every single firm is different. Every single firm offers a different compensation split. I'll get you in just 1 second. Every single firm offers a compensation split, different compensation split. How much are you going to get? It depends on the firm. So we need to have something to compare and contrast. Some firms have better training programs than others. I think as you guys just getting started, especially as you guys just getting started, I understand your commission's important. I get that. But as you're getting started, I think a more important question than how much am I going to get paid? A more important question is, what kind of training are you going to offer me as a brand new agent? What kind of training are you going to provide me? I'm a firm believer, you guys, that if you get the proper training out the gate, the money will follow for years to come. But if you're chasing dollar signs and you just care about getting that money, you may not get the proper training, and that may catch up to you later in your career. What other things are important to you guys when talking to firms? I mean, maybe different charities. You know, firms usually support something. What do we do for fun? You know, what's the office culture? So I think you guys need to talk to 2 or 3 just to have something to compare and contrast. If you only talk to 1, you don't know what else is out there, right? And some of you may have decided where you want to go, and I think that's great, but what can it hurt to talk to somebody else? It's what, 30 minutes out of your life, an hour out of your life, but now you know kind of what you're getting into. When you decide what firm to affiliate with, you will be asked to sign an independent contractor agreement. And that lays out your relationship with the firm you're about to affiliate with. I think you guys should read that independent contractor agreement before you sign it. See what the terms are, see what's in there. What happens if you leave? Can you take your listing? I don't know. It's not your listing, is it? Whose listing is it? It's the firm's. So it's funny to say this, but when you're thinking about joining a firm, one thing you need to look at is what happens if I leave? Can you take the listing with you? Can you take that business with you? And everything should be spelled out in that independent contractor agreement. Questions or comments? I heard somebody on mute. Has anybody talked to a firm yet? Anybody talked to a broker in charge? A few of you? Good, good, good. I get it. Some of you may want to wait until you get your license, but just keep these things in mind. It's not an interview. Don't think of it as an interview because they're not hiring you. It should be a two-way conversation. The firm is demonstrating to you why you should affiliate with them, but you want to ask questions as well. That's why I think about what's important to you. Commission, yes, of course. What about training? What about philanthropy? What about, anything else that might be important to you? Perfect. Other questions? So I want to wrap up unit 7. We're getting there. I want to wrap up unit 7. I want to go over some situations, couple Q&As, make sure we're all good. I'm going to put a situation or 2 up on the screen. I want you to read it, obviously, and then think about it for a second. If you want to share, that's fine. Let's see. Are we going to talk about percentage of commission in North Carolina? Once we get to unit 8, I promise we will talk about your commission when we get to unit 8. So here's a situation. Look at it. Think about it. It'll take you a minute, and then we'll talk about it. let's see what we got here. Let's break this down. Listing agreement does not authorize dual agency. If I'm with a listing agreement, who am I talking about here? I'm talking about the firm and who? Who's the client? The seller. We've entered into a listing agreement and the seller has said no to dual agency. Everybody with me so far? They have said no. They said, I want you exclusive representation all the time. I don't want to share you. So no. A consumer contacts the listing property to see to see the property. The broker does their working with real estate agent disclosure and offers to show the property as a seller subagent, cautioning the buyer that the buyer reveals is confidential. Buyer should act as if they were talking directly to the seller. If the buyer agrees, the broker provides written notice of seller subagency and shows the property. What, if anything, did the agent do wrong in this situation? I love you guys. I see your mouths move. I miss hearing your voices. Did the agent do anything wrong? What do we think? Did the agent do good, thumbs up, or did the agent do bad, thumbs down? The agent did pretty good, didn't they? The seller said no to dual. They didn't try to create agency. I didn't try to make you my buyer client, did I? My seller has already said no. So can I try to create agency for this transaction? No, because the seller has said no, this transaction. So because the seller said no, the only way we can proceed is with that buyer being our customer. Now, what if? I show this property, the buyer says, this doesn't work for me. Can you show me other properties? Now, can I try to create agency? Now, can I try to get a client? As long as the other sellers haven't said no as well. You guys with me? It's specific to this transaction. So the seller said no, a consumer contacts, we do working with real estate agent disclosure. I say I can only proceed as a sub-agent, which makes that buyer my customer. I caution the buyer, whatever you tell me, you might as well pretend like you're talking directly to the seller. If the buyer agrees to this relationship, I proceed as a seller sub-agency and I show this to my buyer customer. In no way did I attempt to create dual because my seller has already said no to dual. Once the seller in this case has said no, dual's not an option. Questions on this one? Now, they don't like this house, try to get you a client, right? Can you show me others? You better believe it. So get another one. Dual agencies. How many clients in dual agency? Everybody show me. How many clients in dual agency? 2. How many customers in dual agency? 0. You can't be in dual and be a seller sub-agent. You either have 2 clients or you don't have dual. As a sub-agent, the customer is your client. Please write that down. Sub-agency equals buyer customer. Sub-agency equals buyer customer. Here's another one, not as long. Okay, so let's see what we got. Listing agreement does not authorize dual agency. So I have another seller. in an agency agreement that has said, nope, I don't want to do dual. I want you to represent me exclusively at all times. A broker in the company is working with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement. An oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. That buyer is my client. So how many clients do I have? I have a listing agreement and I have an oral buyer agency agreement. So how many clients do I have right now? I have 2, seller and buyer. Buyer now wants to see one or more of the company's listings, including the one that the seller said no to dual agency. First off, if we haven't talked about dual agency with the buyer yet in depth, then we need to. So stop. I know you want to see one of my listings, but let me further explain dual agency. If the buyer says, yeah, that's fine, I'm good with that, then we need to go back to the seller, don't we? And we need to try to revisit it with the seller and see if the seller is willing to change their mind in writing. Again, it could be situational. If you just listed the seller's home yesterday, they may not be willing to agree to change their mind to allow dual agency. But what if you listed their home 8 months ago and they're ready to sell? Might they be more apt to change their mind and agree to dual agency? So give them the opportunity. Let them know you have a buyer interested, but you have said no. You have said no, they can't come in the front door. No, they can't bring you an offer. Let them know this is the situation. If the seller changes their mind, we amend the agency agreement because they've already said no in writing. So we need to amend it. We need to change it to yes in writing. If the seller sticks to their guns and said, I said no dual agency, then you cannot show that buyer that listing. Because the seller, remember with dual agency, informed written consent by both parties. Buyer and seller have to agree to do dual. And if either one of them say no, then we can't proceed. The buyer now wants to see, so we can always revisit. If the seller changes their mind, get that change in writing. If not, tell your buyer. Keep in mind, this is an oral buyer agency agreement. So technically, could that buyer call another firm if they really want to see that listing under an oral buyer agency agreement? Could they call another firm? Yeah, because oral is non-exclusive. Oral means I cannot demand exclusivity. Now, if we were in writing, they're stuck with me, aren't they? But oral is non-exclusive. I don't think I'd recommend that, but they could. Questions on this one? One more situation. So now I got a listing agreement that authorizes dual and designated. Seller has said yes, I'll allow dual. Yes, I'll allow designated. I also got a buyer agency agreement in writing. The buyer did not authorize dual, but now the buyer wants to see something that my firm has listed. Can I show it as it stands right now? Seller said yes, buyer said no. Can I show it as it stands right now? No, I cannot. So what do? Revisit it with the buyer. If they really, really want to see it, they'll change their mind in writing. Does everybody see that? They've said no in writing. If they really, really want to see it, we revisit. Don't just say, remember when we talked about that, you said no. You want to change your mind. Revisit it with them, you guys. Go deeper, have the conversation. You guys got to remember, when you meet buyers and sellers for the first couple times, you give them a lot of information. And we may have to go back and revisit some things, particularly when the situation arises, such as when your buyer now wants to see the company's listings. So just revisit it with them. Say, remember we talked about dual, you'd be sharing me with the seller, equal loyalty. You want to change your mind, I need to send you our agency agreement to amend in writing. Change it in writing. But where it stands right now, I cannot show, because to do dual, I need informed written consent of both. Everybody with me? Questions on this one? So the buyer is trying to hire me. The buyer has hired me. The buyer has already hired me. And when they hired me, they said no to dual agency. Remember, you hire me by entering into an agency agreement with me. Questions? All right, so I got some questions for you guys, which means all of you need to respond in the chat. So I can only work on one project at a time? No, we work with multiple buyers and multiple sellers. Remember, exclusivity is a one-way street. If the buyer says no to dual, they can't see anything that my firm has listed. But I can show them everything else that other firms have listed. I can show them for sale by owners. I just can't show them things that Julie's real estate shop has listed. That's what they're saying no to. That's what it means to be a dual agent. Yeah, we're not going to make money if we can only work with one buyer and one seller at a time. It'd be a tough way to make money. Exclusivity is a one-way street. All right, y'all ready to answer some questions for me? Everybody, if you don't know, tell me you don't know, but I'd like to hear from everybody. Here's a question for you. You can tell me Y or N. I know what you speak of. Van? Okay, so the question is, y'all always stay focused on what the question's asking you. Looks like a couple of you went down the what if trail. Stay away from the what if trail. The yeah, but trail, you guys know that? Yeah, but stay away from it when you're answering test questions. I promise you, the information you need to answer this question is looking at you. You don't need to say, well, what if this and what about that? Anybody in the habit of doing that yet? Stop it. Stop it right now. Okay. The commission's working with real estate agent disclosure is a mandatory disclosure. Must it be given in all brokerage transactions at first substantial contact? Must it be given in all? No. We only do the working with real estate agent disclosure for sales. What's that word all mean? Again, you guys, I get it, because many of you aren't going into property management, so you don't even think about lease transactions. I need you to think about lease transactions until you get your license. Once you get your license, you never have to think about them again. But I need you to think about them right now. So do we have to do it in all transactions? No, sales only. It does not give in lease property management situations. Here's another one for you. Y or N, yes or no? This one, everybody in? Does the working with real estate agent disclosure apply to commercial sales transactions? Yes, sales is sales. So whenever you're working with buyers or sellers, may that be residential or commercial. I got a question. Brokerage transactions include lease too? Yes, that's the property manager. So the property manager is working in a for lease situation, and that is, we're brokeraging the deal. We are brokeraging the deal. Again, those of you going into sales, that's where we tend to focus. That's what we want to pay our attention to. And I think that's great. But until you get your license, I need you to remember that there are lease transactions as well. How many of you are going into property management or thinking about property management? Hold your hand up just for 1 second. I got like 3 of you on this whole call. I got, and look, actually like 2.5, because one of you is like, nah, maybe. So let's say of this whole call, I got 2.5. The rest of you are thinking about sales. Everybody with me? And I think that's great. Think about sales. But until you get your license, you got to think about lease as well. Fair enough? Again, we got a whole unit dedicated to the property manager. So we will talk about that and that relationship when we get to unit 12. So to all transactions at first substantial contact. Perfect. Guess what, you guys? You want to feel like you accomplished something today? Do you? Anybody? Guess what we just did? We made it through unit 7. Hey, how long have we been here? About 3 classes now, haven't we? We started, we spent all last week in unit 7, and now we're about 2 hours into it today. What does this tell you about unit 7? I'll just ignore it. I'm sure I'll get these questions right if I guess right. Is that what you're thinking? Wrong. Unit 7's a big one. That's why we spent so much time on it. So I need you guys studying it. Agency is very confusing. I'm telling you guys, you're not leaving this week, last week, as an agency expert. If you guys are leaving unit 7 thinking agency's easy, you did it wrong. Again, practice on your family. Go through and explain agency. Can you explain dual agency? Can you explain single agency? If your family's confused, obviously you are too, right? But if your family says, well, gee, that kind of makes sense, you're doing good. These are red star stuff. Red star stuff says I should be able to hand you my clicker. That's the in-depth knowledge that we have. So we got your book, we got stuff in the online learning system. I got one more resource I'm going to show for you guys after class. We got the tools, several different ways to expose yourself to this information. So agency will start clicking, but you got to review it. Thank you. So those key terms on page 134, again, a big part of understanding agency. Do you know what the words mean? Use the key terms, go through it, use it as a checklist. I know this word, I know that word. I don't know this word. Oh, I think I'll figure it out. I'm just going to move on from it. Is that what you do? No, you don't know what the word means? Look it up. You got unit 7, you got your glossary. What the heck? You got Google. If you really, really need to look it up, Google it with caution. Key point review is on page 178. Again, use it as a checklist. It's a review. So go through. If you know this, this, and this, you're probably okay. If you're not sure about that, go back through and look it up. And then your student quiz. This is the true test of how well you know the information. Remember, if you're not passing the quizzes at the end of the unit and in the online learning system, then you're not prepared for our final exam or your state exam. Use it as a gauge to see how you are. So let's go ahead and take our break. When we come back, I got one more thing I want to show you guys in Unit 7. And then we're moving on to Unit 8. Still on agency, but a different conversation now on agency. Welcome back. Almost popping on. Coming back. Welcome back. All right. So I am taking attendance. And the last thing I want to show you to wrap up Unit 7. I briefly, first off, want to introduce you guys to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission's website, ncrec.gov, ncrec.gov. If you don't remember that, just Google North Carolina Real Estate Commission and it'll pop up. This is a public site. Remember what the commission's main purpose is: to protect the public. So one way that they can help protect the public is to also help educate the public by providing them information to help educate them in buying, selling, leasing property. And there's so much information on this. And again, I don't want you guys spending all of your study time here, but there are just a few things you may want to consider. We're going to look at this again in just a bit, well, in a couple weeks, because we're going to talk about your process for applying for a license. So we'll see this. Give me a few weeks and we'll talk about that. Couple tabs to introduce you to. Probably one of the more commonly used tabs is the publications tab, and particularly if you go publications. Everybody see that? I'm not repeating myself. Publications. And there's some, there's your disclosure forms. There's some guides. Here's these Q&A brochures that I've already put in the online learning system for you guys. So again, just some good information. Don't spend all your study time here. What I want to introduce you guys to right now is the resources tab, which again is a good source for information. And one thing the commission has provided is a video library. So if we look at resources and then the video library, and we have several different, types of categories. But if we look at the video library for brokers, again, there's more in here than what you need to know for your exam. So please hear me when I say, I think it's okay to look and peruse and poke around, but I don't want you to spend all your study time here. One thing you may want to consider looking at, the commission has provided videos to the consumer, working with real estate agents for the sellers and working with real estate agents for the buyers. And these videos pretty much sum up Unit 7, wrap up Unit 7 and what that means to work with an agent. I'm going to show you the buyer video right now. I'm not going to show you the seller video in class because it's similar, but I am going to show you the buyer video right now. But I want you guys to know where it is. So if you want to go back and watch the seller or rewatch the buyer, again, I think this is another tool to help you guys better wrap your brain around agency. So we're going to watch this. It's about, I think it's right at 5 minutes. If you guys will you give me a thumbs up when it starts that you can hear it? So I know we're good there.
Are you considering buying a house or other real estate? If so, you may want a real estate agent to guide you through the process. Here at the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, we want you to understand the different ways you can work with an agent when buying real estate and the services agents can provide. You have several choices about how a real estate firm and its agents will work with you. For example, you may want them to represent only you as a buyer agent, or you may be willing to allow them to represent both you and the seller at the same time as a dual agent. You might even prefer to be unrepresented and work directly with the seller's agent. Some brokers will offer you a choice of these services, and others may not. Whether you choose to work with a buyer agent, dual agent, or seller's agent, that agent must treat you honestly and fairly and tell you about any material facts that the agent knows about or should know about that could influence your decisions in the transaction. The Real Estate Commission has developed a disclosure form called Working with Real Estate Agents to help you understand the different kinds of agency relationships. The form emphasizes the importance of not sharing confidential information with an agent until you know the agent represents you. The Real Estate Commission requires every real estate agent to review this disclosure form with you and to ask you to sign it before receiving any confidential information from you or assisting with your purchase. The Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure is not a contract. Signing it does not obligate you to work with the agent who presented it to you. Your signature is just an acknowledgement that you've received the disclosure form. The Commission also publishes a brochure entitled Questions and Answers on Working with Real Estate Agents. Now, this brochure explains what a real estate agent's duties are, what services your agent will provide for you, and how the agent will be paid. You can download the brochure for free from the Commission's website at ncrec.gov. If you choose to have a buyer agent or firm represent you, they owe you certain duties. First, the firm and its agents must promote your best interest ahead of all others. They must be loyal to you, follow your lawful instructions, and give you information about the property that could influence your purchasing decisions. Your agent must also use reasonable skill, care, and diligence throughout the process and account for all money they receive on your behalf. Once you've agreed that a firm or agent will represent you, they may not give certain confidential information about you to the seller or the seller's agents without your permission. Confidential information includes your motivation for buying or your negotiating strategy. For this reason, don't tell the agent anything that you don't want a seller to know until you enter into an agreement to hire the agent. A buyer agent will help you find a suitable property, gather more information about properties you're interested in, prepare and submit an offer, order inspections, and prepare for closing. A buyer agent may be paid in different ways. Often, the agent will seek payment from the seller or listing firm first, but if the seller and listing firm refuse, then you may have to pay the buyer agent yourself. You and the agent will address the firm's fees in the written buyer agency agreement. So be sure to read and understand any agency agreement before you sign it, and make sure it includes any promises that the agent has made to you. You'll also be asked to indicate in the buyer agency agreement if the firm you're hiring would be allowed to participate in dual agency. Dual agency is when the firm that represents you also represents the seller at the same time. This is most likely to happen if your buyer agent's firm has a listing agreement with the owner of a property that you want to purchase. In a dual agency situation, the firm and its agents owe equal obligations to you and the seller rather than only representing your interests. Because of this, your agent may lose their ability to advise, counsel, or advocate for either party. In order to reduce the conflict of interest inherent in dual agency, some real estate firms may offer a type of dual agency called designated dual agency. Now, this is where one agent within the firm is designated to represent only you, and another agent within the firm is designated to represent only the seller. Neither agent should have confidential information about the other party at the time of designation. This type of dual agency allows you and the seller to be more fully represented because it allows your agent to advise you and to negotiate and advocate for you. For more information about the duties and responsibilities of real estate agents, visit the Commission's website at ncrec.gov and click on the Publications tab, or just give us a call.
Thoughts? Could you imagine being a consumer and hearing about this stuff for the first time? Kind of makes you want to call an agent, doesn't it? Because you watch that video and you're going, huh? What? So as the consumer, I think it kind of illustrates or reiterates the fact that working with agents in the transaction may be in your best interest, maybe in the consumer's best interest. Remember, people buy and sell houses every single day without the assistance of an agent. We are not required in the transaction, but having the knowledge, having the market knowledge, the knowledge of the forms, the process, the transaction, it makes them want to hire us. Because to us, I mean, this is just another day, right? We do this multiple times a day. They may just buy a house once in their lifetime. Thoughts or comments? ncrec.gov. We went resources, video library. Again, I encourage you to watch that video again. Watch the video on the sellers. Read Unit 7. Read Unit 7 again. Look at the stuff in the online learning system. Lots of tools there to help you guys wrap your brains around this. Okay. Other good videos in here. And again, you guys, if we're not talking about it, then don't worry about it. We're going to talk about creating a firm, all that. You get to, and assuming, registering, assume name, affiliating, activation, all this comes in post licensing. So, you know, you're welcome to just kind of flip through here, but really for you guys to help focus your attention, when you get to the video library right now, just focus on the working with real estate agents for seller and buyer. No one further discussion, more detailed discussion is going to come when you get to post. But that takes us back to not putting your cart before your horse, right? You can't go to post licensing until you get a license. So one step at a time. We're just easing you guys in. Okay. Big deep breath. Here we go to Unit 8. Still on agency, but talking a little bit more about agency. And in Unit 8, specifically, we're getting into our agency agreements, which are binding contracts between the principal and the firm. Binding meaning they would stand up in a court of law. So specifically what these agency agreements are about. Also in this unit, we're going to get more specifically into working with sellers, more specifically working with buyers. And we're going to talk about your commission. I know that's a burning question, so we're going to make sure we address your commission, how much you get paid, when you get paid, all that good stuff. So we're going to explain our agency contracts. We're going to talk about something called the North Carolina Residential Property Disclosure Act. This applies to the sellers. So we'll talk about that. As I said, we're going to talk about working specifically with sellers. We're going to talk about working specifically with buyers. And then at the end of this unit, we get to figure out some math. But this is fun math. This is calculating your commission. That's good math, isn't it? Y'all be able to do this in your head soon, I promise you. The other important math in Unit 8 is called seller net. Seller net is helping the seller figure out how much they're going to make after they sell their house. Do you think that's a question you hear a lot? If you sell my house, how much am I going to make? And so we need to help the seller calculate that net, and that's more math that we're going to look at in this unit. So back in Unit 7, before we jump into this, back in Unit 7, we introduced you guys to some terminology. So this is a repeat, but we're going to use more and more of this verbiage, this terminology in Unit 8, particularly when we look at the forms, the agency agreements. Those working with the buyer are referred to as either the buyer's agent or the buyer's firm. Those working with the buyer and our forms call them the selling agent and the selling firm. Do you guys see the ing? I need you to see the ing. What's the activity? You are selling the property to the buyer. So our forms refer to the buyer's agent as the selling agent, selling firm. And then on the other side, you got the seller's agent, seller's firm. But other terminology, what we see in our forms is the listing agent and the listing firm. Again, what's the activity? That's what the ings are referring to, is the activity. So you're listing and or selling, depending on who you're working with, the buyer or the seller. So starting on page 188. we start talking about our written agency agreements. Please note, this is just about written agency agreements. We're putting oral buyer agency off to the side for just a second. Eventually, that oral buyer has to be in writing. You guys see that word must? Everybody see it? Highlight it, underline it 5 times. Written agency agreements must be signed by all parties. The parties being the client or the principal, buyer or seller, owner in a property management agreement. The other party being the firm. Remember, your relationship, the individual broker's relationship with the firm, is that of a general agent. And as a general agent of my firm, I have some power. I have some ability. General agent is some. And while all firms are different, most firms allow the individual broker to sign the agency agreement on behalf of the firm. So the parties that sign it generally are the client and the agent. The agent signs it on behalf of the firm because we are a general agent with the firm. Because we're the ones that sign it, another must is that we have to include our license number. Now, when we look at our agency agreements on the signature page, we're going to see where there's a place for the firm's number. Is the firm's license number a must? Is the firm's license number a must? No. Whose license number is a must? The individual broker, because we're the ones signing it. Once you guys get your license, you'll be issued a 6-digit number. Go ahead and memorize it. Put it on a flashcard if you have to, but go ahead and memorize it because you need your license number wherever you go. I often joke that the Real Estate Commission has no clue who Julie Campbell is, but by golly, they know who 264172 is. So go ahead and memorize your number. You need it everywhere. So we got it signed by all parties, the agent on behalf of the firm with the client, our license number. Every single written agency agreement has to have a definite end date. We have to agree on how long this agency agreement is going to last. And when it's over, guys, it's over. Yes, we can agree to extend it. Do we have to, though? No, because we've already agreed when we entered into this agency agreement how long we're going to work together. It's a negotiable field. We fill the blank in, we put the date in. So how long do we work with buyers and sellers? Well, it kind of depends. It might depend on the market. It might depend on your firm's policy. There is no, we work together for X amount of time. It's completely negotiable between the client and the firm. The other must of our written agency agreements is that it contains our non-discrimination provision. We actually list out in our agency agreements, all caps and in bold, that says we are not going to discriminate against the protected classes. The protected classes as identified by Fair Housing. Got a whole unit dedicated to fair housing, the protected classes, when we get to Unit 19. So we'll see this when we look at our agency agreements, talking more about it when we get to Unit 19. So these are the musts. In other words, you don't have a valid agency agreement in North Carolina if you don't have these things. There are other things we can add to it, of course. We're learning more and more about those. But these are the musts. Please hear me. Agency agreements are employment contracts. I think this tends to be a problem topic. Agency agreements are employment contracts. The listing agreement, the seller is hiring me to market and list their property. The buyer's agency agreement, the buyer is hiring me to help them locate and purchase a property. The property management agreement, the owner is hiring me to manage their property, to manage their rental properties. Agency agreements are employment contracts. We're being hired to do not just any job, we're being hired to do a very specific job. Our agency agreements are very specific. So in other words, the seller can't, once we enter into a listing agreement, the seller can't boss me around and tell me to come over and mow their grass on Tuesday, right? Because they're not hiring me to be there anything, do everything. They're hiring me to help them market, list, and sell their properties. Everybody with me? It's very specific. They're not just hiring me for the sake of hiring me. You want me to mow your grass on Tuesday? We need to talk more money. That's a different kind of agreement. Our written agency agreements or any of our agency agreements must be in writing from the beginning every time we work with an owner. Listing agreements and property management agreements. I cannot perform a single service for the owner of a property without first entering into a written agency agreement. It's only buyers and tenants that I can work with under an oral agreement at first. I think this whole screen is a problem topic. Employment contracts, and from the beginning with owners, not buyers, not tenants. Questions, comments before we make sure we're good with this screen. So why do we need to use a listing agreement? Well, obviously it secures our commission, right? It's an employment contract. So if you want to get paid, if you want to secure your commission, then I got to have an agreement. I got to have a binding contract in place. If I don't have that, then there's no commitment. There's no loyalty. There's no requirement to pay me. So one of the big things the employment contract does, specifically in this case, the listing agreement, it makes the seller pay me when I've done the job that I was hired to do. And what job was I hired to do? Market and sell their home. Once I've done that, I've earned my commission. So an employment contract, it's got to offer compensation. The other thing that the listing agreements do is it creates inventory. As a salesman, I need a product to sell. Yes, can we agree with that? I need a product to sell. And it might be that I don't have any listings right now. Maybe I'm just working with buyers. I don't have any listings. My last listing closed last week and I'm trying to get the next listing. But if I don't have inventory, if I don't have a product to sell, then what kind of agent am I? What kind of salesman am I? So one thing the listing agreement does is it creates inventory. Our listing agreements have us pull our listings together into our local multiple listing services. We're going to officially introduce you to the MLS in just a second. And by pulling our listings together, we create an inventory. So now I just don't have to worry about something that I have listed. Now I'm available to sell anything that any agent in the Triad MLS has listed. Part of using these listing agreements is saying, we're going to put your listing in MLS and make it available to all the agents and their buyer clients or customers. So it allows us to pull our listings together, create inventory, and help the seller sell, but also help our buyers buy. Look with me, if you will, page 188. Next to last paragraph on page 188. The next to last paragraph starts with note, however, under NCREC rules. Everybody see that? Most of that paragraph we can cross out. Do you see where it says there's only one exception to this rule? Cross that bottom part out. That again is talking about how the seller can change their mind orally once they've said no to dual in writing. I don't know why this is in your book 3 times, but I want you guys to cross it out, pretend like it isn't there. Everybody see that? The last part of that paragraph that starts with there is only one exception. Cross it out. It causes confusion. The only way to change something in writing is in writing. So starting at the top of the page 189, there's a whole different, lots of different ways that you can solicit consumers, that you can try to get business. And this class is not about helping you solicit. This class is not about helping you get buyers and sellers. What this class is about is telling you things that you can't do. Think outside the box when it comes to soliciting, when it comes to getting buyer and seller clients. But before we do that, let's address what we can't do. One thing we can't do is solicit somebody else's active client. If you find an active listing in MLS, it is there because that seller has hired an agent. Only agents can put listings in MLS. So if you're going through the MLS and you see an active listing for sale, you can't contact that seller. Could you imagine? Let's say I'm not a good agent and I'm going through the MLS and I see a listing and I contact the seller. I can look them up, owner of record, right? I can go to the Register of Deeds and look them up. All I need is the address. And I call that seller and say, I don't think your agent's doing a really good job. So why don't you fire them and hire me? Does that sound very ethical? Does that sit right with you? I hope not. You're shaking your head no, you're doing good. That is a direct violation of the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. NAR is National Association of Realtors. So once you join NAR, you're kind of held to a higher standard as a realtor. You're held to a higher standard. We have a code of ethics that we have to follow. And one of those code of ethics says, we're not going to solicit somebody else's active clients. Have you guys ever been open housing and walk into an open house and have the agent ask you, are you working with a buyer? Has anybody ever been asked that? Guys, we're not trying to be nosy. We're just trying to learn if you currently have, are you working with an agent? We're not being nosy. We're just asking you if you currently have an active relationship. If you're working with an agent, you come into my open house and I say, are you working with an agent? You say, yes. I know that means hands off. If you say no, now my business card comes out of my pocket, doesn't it? Now I may have the opportunity to try to solicit that business. We're not being nosy. We're just asking to know if we got a shot. If you don't join NAR, some of your firms may require it, some may not. But if you don't join NAR, you still can't solicit somebody else's active client. The commission could come down, the courts could come down, something called tortious interference, which is just negatively impacting wrongful doing in somebody else's existing business relationship. So even if you don't join NAR, you still can't solicit somebody else's client. So we ask questions. Again, if it's in MLS, now what if that listing expires in MLS? It was active today, but it expires tomorrow. Once it's expired, can I try to solicit that seller? Yeah, because they no longer have a relationship. They're no longer an active client. It's just the active, and same thing with the buyers. This is why we ask, are you working with an agent? I tell you, the best coached buyers, I swear they have the best agents, because you'll be doing an open house and somebody will come in and you'll be like, hey folks, how are you today? We have an agent. You have a really good agent. Let me tell you what, still come on in. That's how we coach our buyers. If I send my buyers open housing, I send them with my stack of my business cards. So not only can they say we have an agent, they can say, Schwabau, here she is, give her a call with any questions. I'd rather them talk to me than them. Yes. I don't want people talking to my buyers. So coach your buyers, let them know when they go open housing, they're going to be asked. So we can't solicit somebody else's active clients. Once we learn that they're active, hands off. Another rule that we have to follow when soliciting consumers, we got to pay attention to the do not call registry. Supposedly, we can put our phone number on the do not call registry and not get phone calls from solicitors, spam. Anybody else get a cajillion of these things? They seem to come in waves, don't they? You could go weeks without hearing something, and you get like 12 in one day or something. Drives us nuts. I don't know why anybody else doesn't have to follow the do not call laws, but guess what? We do. So if you want to solicit business via cold calling, and by cold calling, I mean pick up the phone and ask them, do you want to buy or sell? If that's the route you want to go, then you need to get your hands on the do not call registry before you call. Because if that phone number is on the do not call registry, you cannot call to solicit their business. But you got to get your hands on that registry. There's a cost. I don't know how much. Maybe your firm will go in on the cost with you. I don't know. But the point I need you guys to hear is before you pick up the phone and solicit business that way, I need you to get your hands on the do not call registry. Most good rules have exceptions, and this one is no different. There are a few exceptions to the do not call. If it's a former client, you previously had an agency relationship with them. After the agency relationship is over, you can call them for up to 18 months after the relationship is over, or until they tell you to stop calling. If they say, stop calling me, then we need to honor that request. So former client, somebody that we previously had a business relationship with, we can call for up to 18 months. If you got a soft inquiry from a consumer, maybe they came into your open house and put their phone number down on your open house sign-in sheet. Maybe they hit you up on your website and left their phone number that way. If they provide you with their phone number, even if they're on the do not call, we can call them for up to 3 months because they gave you their phone number. So we can call them for up to 3 months or until they tell me to stop calling. Anytime they tell me to stop calling, we've got to honor that request. We've got to honor their request. That's what the little asterisks mean. Up to 18 months or up to 3 months or until they tell us to stop calling. We can also call a for sale by owner, a FSBO, for sale by owner, only if you have an interested buyer. If the for sale by owner is on the do not call registry, you cannot call the FSBO to solicit their listing. Do you have a genuinely interested buyer, somebody that's seriously interested? I mean, they're for sale by owner, so they're trying to sell their listing, right? They're just doing it on their own. They didn't hire an agent. So if you have a genuinely interested buyer, we can call that for sale by owner, even if they're on the do not call, but we cannot solicit the listing. Gee, Julie, what's the big deal? Well, I think the big deal is at the bottom of page 189. Penalties for violating the do not call registry. You could be looking up to $11,000 per call federally. State, you could be looking at $500 to $5,000 per call. So is violating the do not call registry a big deal? The numbers kind of speak for themselves, right? So again, if cold calling is the route you want to go, that's fine. You just got to make sure that you get your hands on that do not call registry. Your firm will help you with that. You'll talk more about that in post licensing as well. So we have to follow the do not call laws and rules. The other thing I can't do to solicit business, well, I mean, I can, but I need to be cautious. There's something called the CAN-SPAM Act. Over on page 190, Controlling of the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing Act. That's what CAN-SPAM stands for, page 190. Don't need to know that, but I'd just like to let you know that CAN-SPAM comes from somewhere. This refers to sending mass or bulk emails. And if you want to solicit business, you get your hands on an email list and you want to solicit business via email, that's fine, but you have to provide an opt-out. You guys ever get junk email or mass email and there's the unsubscribe button at the bottom? Sometimes it's itty bitty and it's really hard to find, but guess what? It's there. That is required. If you're going to send out mass email, it has to have an option to opt out. It has to have an unsubscribe button. If that consumer replies to your email and says, please remove me from your email list, we've got to honor that request. Same thing with junk fax. Your book also mentions that, junk fax. We got to give them the opt-out option. So what I've done is given you guys a list of things that you can't do or you need to be cautious of when doing to solicit business. Why don't you guys share with me in a chat? What are some other ways? What are some other things you can do that you can do to solicit business? What are some things we can do to try to solicit business? Welcome back. Some of you thought about this. That's okay. Let's see what we think. What are things that we can do? Door to door. Yeah, absolutely. You can go door to door. Now, before you go into the subdivision, if the subdivision says no soliciting, can you knock on the doors of that subdivision? No, they told you at the entrance, no soliciting. Also, if you are thinking about doing door to door, take somebody with you, safety in numbers. Okay, so door to door absolutely is an option. Flyers, postcards, signs out. Yeah, you get a listing, you're putting a sign in somebody's front yard. How many cars drive by your sign every day? Isn't that a good way? Having a listing can create business. There's an old saying in this industry that says those who list last. They make it, they survive because they always have a product. They always have their name out there. So yeah, get a listing, put a sign in a yard. Hopefully the buyer will call you. Word of mouth, there it is right there, guys. You get your very first client, you get your license, you affiliate with a firm, and you get your very first client. And you treat that client really good. You follow license law and commission rule, you help them, you create that fiduciary, you have a good relationship, and they're very, very pleased with you and your service. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell their family and friends, that'll tell their family and friends, that'll tell their family and friends. Word of mouth referrals is one of the best ways that we can get business. What if you don't treat that client good? Boy, it's hard these days to recover from one bad Google review, isn't it? It's tough. You get enough of those bad Google reviews, and what is the consumer thinking about you? You guys look at Google reviews before you go out to eat to a new restaurant? I mean, we got to take some of it with a grain of salt. I get that. But if they don't have good reviews, I go somewhere else, right? Same thing with real estate agents. The word of mouth, building that reputation. I'm telling you guys, I know seasoned agents that have been in the industry for 30 years. You know what? They're not out sending postcards and doing open houses anymore. They're relying on their past clients. They're relying on those referrals. Bench ads, absolutely. You get an ad on a bench, grocery cart. I've seen those now too. Billboards. Social media is huge, absolutely. Being involved in social media, being able to put your information out there, networking just in general. You know, before we had social media, we had networking. So just getting out and meeting people is a great way to get your business. Leaving your business card at retail locations with permissions. Absolutely. Have you guys ever gone into a local restaurant and seen the table sitting there with business cards? Ask if you can put your business card on their table or on their bulletin board. Social media, business cards. I know some real estate coaches will tell you, especially when you're getting started, you can take this information and do what you want with it. They will tell you to put 5 business cards in your pocket when you leave the house. Put 5 of your business cards in your pocket every morning you leave the house, and do not come home until all those cards are given out. So you now have a challenge to put your card in 5 people's hands each day. It's kind of like a numbers game, right? If you get your business card out to enough people, somebody's bound to call you. So how do you get that one person to call you? You got to put your business cards in people's hands. You got to get it out there, your contact information. Hosting a brunch, absolutely. An open house or any kind of brunching. Friends and family, social media, networking, absolutely. Newspapers, we still pick those up every once in a while. Cold calling after you check the do not call, there you go. Postcards, you guys get postcards and stuff from real estate agents right now in your neighborhood, especially in the last couple of years when we needed inventory. So I think you guys are getting it, right? And again, once you guys get your license, I encourage you to think outside the box. Don't do what everybody else is doing. How are you going to make yourself stand out from all of the other agents? Again, back in my administrative days, I did new agent training, and I gave homework back then too. And one of the first homework assignments that new agents got from me, and again, take with this and do with it what you will. I made all my new agents take a piece of paper and write 1 through 100 on it. And then I had them write down 100 people that they know. Who do you know? Because you know what? All those people that you know, they know other people as well, don't they? So by you identifying 100 people you know, if they know they're 100 people, it's that getting that word of mouth out. And with that little exercise, the first 40, 50, 60 are really easy. But then after that, it's like, gosh, now you're struggling. Like, I know my mailman and I know my dental hygienist, right? Now you're like really stretching for the people that you know. But start with who you already have in your back pocket. Start with who you know. There's your free advice for the day. You do with that what you will. Questions or comments on what we can or cannot do to solicit business? I just saw that one. Ask people in the supermarket if they're looking to buy a house. Love it. You're wearing your name badge in the Harris Teeter, aren't you? There you go. Another option, another possibility. You guys don't discount your out-of-state friends and family. We do have the ability to send and receive referral fees. This idea of a foreign broker is a real estate agent in another state. So if I want to send, let's say I have a family member move into, I don't care, pick a state, Texas. I can refer that family member to an agent in Texas and collect a referral fee. Same thing if that agent in Texas has somebody that wants to buy a house in North Carolina. They can refer them to me because I have an active license in North Carolina. So this idea of a foreign broker is any agent outside of your state. So as you guys are thinking of your 100 people that you know, don't discount out of state friends and family. Referral fee is better than nothing. And I'm telling y'all, referral money is the easiest money you'll ever make. Bob, this is Linda. Linda, this is Bob. And poof, you're going to get a referral fee when that thing closes. How about that? If you want to get paid a referral fee, you do have to have an active license. And that agent from Texas cannot come to North Carolina for the purpose of this transaction. I can't go to Texas for the transaction because I don't have a license in Texas. I could go to Texas for pleasure, but I couldn't go for the transaction. Does that make sense? They can't come into my state, my territory. I can't go onto theirs. Another law that we need to be familiar with is the Sherman's antitrust laws. There are some laws that prohibit monopolies. The whole point of antitrust laws is to prohibit a monopoly. And a monopoly is just anything that prohibits or restrains trade. Remember, real estate is a market, and any open market is just that, it's open, and we don't prohibit or restrain trade. Sherman's antitrust law is not just about real estate, but there are some things about Sherman's antitrust laws that apply to real estate. And one thing that Sherman's antitrust law says is that we can't engage in the practice of price fixing. A couple of you have already asked me, what's my commission? How much commission am I going to get? Some of you might have just been thinking, if I send a referral to my family member in Texas, how much is that referral fee? And you noticed I haven't answered those questions yet, because Sherman's antitrust laws, price fixing, says there is no set rate. There is no set commission. The firm dictates how much commission they expect to collect when they've done the job that they've hired, when they've completed the job that they were hired to do. The firm dictates how much referral fee we can collect when that family member in Texas successfully buys. Price fixing, your commission, referral fees is up to the firm policy. National Association of Realtors does not set our commission. North Carolina Association of Realtors, North Carolina Real Estate Commission, or your local board of realtors do not set the commission. We need to be very careful when talking to consumers. Very careful when talking to consumers. You're going to be at the listing appointment. You or the seller are going to go through the terms of the agency agreement. And then you're going to get to commission. And the seller's going to look at you and say, how much do you charge? And I need you guys to be very careful how you answer that. Do not say, all of us in the triad charge X amount. Do not say, they tell me, the local board of realtors tells me how much to charge. We always say, my firm's policy is to charge X amount. Some firms charge more than others. It's up to the firm's policy. To be careful. Firms determine the policy. Remember we said earlier, I want you guys to talk to a couple different firms before you affiliate. And one question you may have is, what is your compensation structure? How much does the firm expect to get paid versus what's my split going to be? And I need everybody to hear me right now when we say it's all different. There is no fixed commission. Now, is it the case that most of us charge the same amount? We may have a figure in mind that we think is similar across our market, our area, but that's because the firm chose to be competitive. The firm chose to charge that amount. Is everybody with me? There is no standard. Be very careful how you answer that. My firm's policy is to charge X amount. We're also not going to compare our commission to others. So when you're sitting at that listing appointment, don't look at that seller and say, well, this is what I charge, but I'll tell you what, the guy down the street, they charge this much and you're going to get less of a service. Does that sound professional? If you're comparing your services to other, if you're throwing somebody else under the bus? No. When we get in that listing appointment or we start talking to buyers, we talk about us and the services that we provide Don't compare. Another antitrust thing to avoid is called boycotting or group boycotting. This is when two or more businesses or agents conspire together to drive somebody else out of the market. You may have a bad experience with another agent. Your buyer may have a bad experience with the home inspector or the lender. I can choose not to work with that home inspector again. I can choose not to recommend to future buyers they use that home inspector. What I can't do is show up at the office and say, okay, guys, bad experience. Let's all agree never to use this home inspector again. That's us working together to drive them out of business. Maybe your home inspector had a bad day that day. Do you guys ever have a bad day? Sometimes you just have a bad day, don't you? Maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they generally are a terrible home inspector and they're no good at what they do. They don't need your help to drive them out of the market. If they're bad enough, they will drive themselves out of the market. They will drive themselves out of business. So we can't conspire together. We can't work together to try to reduce the competition, to try to drive somebody else out. The other thing here is allocating or dividing the markets. We've already said that my real estate license allows me to brokerage any transaction as long as the property is located in the state of North Carolina. Everybody good with that? That's what your North Carolina license allows you to do. You can brokerage any transaction. I may choose to work a certain area. I may choose, and that's my choice. I could choose just to work Forsyth County. That's all I want to work. If it's outside of Forsyth County, I'm not interested and I'll refer it to somebody else. You may choose to only work Guilford County. Again, that's your choice. What we can't do is come together and say, all right, I'm only going to work Forsyth. You're only going to work Guilford. I'm not going to step in Guilford. You're not going to step in Forsyth. We're dividing the market. What I choose to do is on me. We can't agree. Now, could we partner together? Yeah, you send me your Forsyth or Guilford, and I'll send you my Forsyth. But we're not dividing the market. We're not allocating the market. So, gee, Julie, what's the big deal? Price fixing, whatever. I tell a seller we all charge the same amount. Penalties for violating Sherman's antitrust laws, page 199, next to last paragraph. Penalties for violating Sherman's antitrust laws could be up to $100,000. It's in black and white right in front of you on page 191. I did not just make that number up. And or 3 years in prison. Is price fixing worth it? Is price fixing telling your seller everybody charges the same thing? I don't think so. So violating penalties, big deals. And this is why we need to be aware of these Sherman antitrust laws. Questions? Somehow it's break time already. That last hour went by fast, didn't it? It did for me anyway. I can't speak for you guys, but it did for me. So let's go ahead and take 10. We come back, we'll finish up for the day. And we're back. Cameras are coming on. Welcome back. And I can see you at all times. All right, so I am taking attendance. And we talked about Sherman's antitrust laws. Page 191, we start talking about the commission a little bit. Earning your commission. First off, I need everybody to understand there's a difference. And when we earn our commission versus when we're actually paid. The commission that we typically earn is either going to be a percentage of the sales price. What does the word of mean when we see that in a math problem? The word of means multiply. So if you're a commission base, if you're a percentage of the sales price, you take your sales price times the percentage, that's going to be your commission or your firm's commission. Or what we might see in a property management situation, for example, as an example, is a flat fee. Typically in sales, we're a percentage of the sales price. But again, it's up to the firm's policy and it's completely negotiable. If you want to get paid, you got to have an active license. We'll talk about the different license statuses, active versus inactive, current versus expired, when we get into our license law and commission rules. But an active license status is the only status in which you can get paid or promote your brokerage services in any way. So there's one of two or both scenarios in which we can get paid. You're affiliated with the firm that has the listing agreement. So you've been brought on as the listing agent. Your name is on the sign in the front yard. You're working directly with the sellers. You're affiliated with that firm. That firm allowed you to work with their sellers. Or you're the one that brought the ready, willing, and able buyer. Remember our three-legged stool? And when we talk about ready, willing, and able, I need all three pieces of that. I need a buyer that's ready to buy, a buyer that's willing to buy, and a buyer that's able. A lot of times that comes down to financials, pre-approval, lending, that kind of thing. Did I have a question? Did I hear somebody on mute? Am I just hearing things? Great. So to earn your commission, again, you're either affiliated with a firm, you've been working as the listing agent with the seller, or you're the one that brings the buyer, that ready, willing, and able buyer. Technically, we have earned our commission when we connected the seller with this ready, willing, and able buyer. We go under contract, the buyer approves that they can buy, they got loan approval, et cetera, et cetera. Technically, that's when we've earned our commission. Here's the hard truth. Everybody ready? In sales, we usually don't get paid until it closes. So we earn it when we connect them. We earn it when we connect the two and go under contract, have the two legally bound to each other. But we don't actually get paid typically until it closes. Let's talk about this. First off, why don't you guys remind me in the chat? Make sure if we missed attendance, we can at least give you some credit for this last hour. So everybody in the chat, so I can know you're here. The agency relationship is between the client and who? One word answer. The client and the agency relationship is between the client and the I'm hearing from everybody, and if you don't know, tell me. I don't know. IDK. The agency relationship is between the client Hint, the client could be the buyer or the seller. So it's between the buyer or the seller, and is everybody in? The firm. Firm, not the individual agent, but the firm. The client hires the firm. The firm allows you to work with their buyer and seller. So everybody good with me so far? Agency relationship is between the client and the firm. You don't have to answer me in the chat, but let me ask you guys another question. Whose commission is it? It is the firm's commission. The firm shares their commission with you. Yes? I can't make anybody pay me because I myself am not in an agency relationship with them. It's the firm that created that. It's the firm that's in that employment agreement, that employment contract. It's the firm's commission. They share it with you. How much of their commission are they going to share with you? That's up to the firm's policy. They all have different compensation splits. Yet another reason for you guys to talk to 2 or 3 so you can see which compensation split works best for you. Don't just assume that a higher compensation split is best. There are firms out there that offer 100%. They will get, all you got to do is pay a transaction fee and then everything else is yours. There are other firms out there that may do a 60-40 split or 70-30 split, whatever, pick it up. The more you pay, the more you get 100% compensation, the less that the firm provides. So if you're getting 100%, you're probably buying your own yard signs. You're probably buying your own combo boxes. You have to buy your own stuff. If you're on a 60-40 split, the firm may provide signs. The firm may provide combo boxes. Everybody hear me? So don't just assume that 100% is best, because that's more money that you're going to have to talk to a couple different firms because they are all different. So it's the firm's commission. They share their commission with you. If this transaction doesn't close, more often than not, we're not going to get paid. We earn our commission when we connect the two, but we don't get paid until it closes. Whether or not we're going to go after the buyer or the seller for commission in court is not up to us, is it? It's up to the firm. Is the firm going to take the buyer or seller to court to collect commission? And I'll be really honest with you, I don't know many firms that do. Remember we just talked about Google reviews? Do you want to be the firm on Google review that sues sellers and buyers at the drop of a hat? Do you want to be the firm on Google reviews that takes buyers and sellers to court all the dang time? What are future buyers and sellers going to say? Gosh, I don't want to hire Julie's real estate shop because she's going to sue me. So there it is, you guys. Can the firm go after the buyer or the seller for commission? Sure. Do they? Not often. I'm not saying they never do. I'm sure you may have an example where they do. We earn our commission when we connect the two. We don't actually get paid until it closes. And I hate to do this, but the hard truth is they don't all close. Sometimes they terminate. Sometimes you don't get paid. Y'all want to hear my heartbreaking story before we move on? I had buyers that called me 3 hours before closing and said, we're not coming. And I said, because I'm a little naive sometimes, I know this about myself. And I said, okay, this time doesn't work for you. When would you like to close? And he said, no, Julie, we're not buying this house. We're terminating. Now they had to suffer the consequences of breach that are spelled out in the contract between the buyer and the seller. We'll talk about that. They did breach the contract and they had to suffer. But guys, this is 3 hours before closing. And I'm getting this call that we're not coming. My other free advice for you guys today, don't spend it until you got it. Don't spend that commission money until it's in your hand, until it closes, because if they never show up to closing, we don't get paid until it closes. I didn't hear anybody leave the call, so I didn't think that's sales. This is sales. Sales is sales. And typically in a sales relationship, if you don't close the deal, may it be real estate or not. Anybody ever work for commission? Maybe in a retail store, or you might get a little bit hourly or something, but I mean, even same thing waiting tables, right? You get a little bit hourly, but if you don't treat that table good, you're not going to make a tip, are you? Kind of the same thing here. If you don't get them through the meal, then you're not going to get paid. Our commission is covered under Commission Rule 58A.0109. Again, just as reference, if you want to learn more about commission, we're obviously going to talk about commission a little bit more. We're just introducing you to this idea. When we get into our financing units and our closing units, we got some regulations on kickbacks and referral fees, that kind of thing, what we can and cannot accept. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But 58A.0109 is the commission rule that addresses our commission. Questions? So on page 192, let's talk specifically about working with sellers. And one of the first things that we want to do when we're working with sellers is we got to get ready for the listing appointment. We need to gather information. We need to learn about the property. We can go to various websites, Register of Deeds, NCDOT, city planning site, school board. We can go out to various sites. Again, your firm will probably provide you with a list of places to research and learning about the property. Ideally, for listing appointments, when we're getting ready for listing appointments, ideally, we want to learn as much about the home as we possibly can. By the time we show up for the listing appointment, we should know everything or practically everything, except for what it looks like inside. We may be able to go to the MLS and look at past pictures. They always keep the history, so we can look at previous listings that have previous pictures. All that does is tell me what the home used to look like. It tells me what the home looked like when these guys bought. I don't know what they've done to it over the time that they've owned it. Did they trash it? Did they fix it up? Did they knock down the wall and expand the living room, right? I have no idea. So we can get an idea by looking at the history in MLS. I think I mentioned the other day, competitive listing appointments are very much a thing right now. And what I mean by that is sellers are talking to multiple agents, multiple firms before they decide who to hire. So let's say me, and I just looked up. So I just saw Erica. So Erica, I'm going to pick on you for a minute if you don't mind. Let's say Eric and I are going on a competitive listing appointment. I'm going at 2 and she's going to go at 4. And the sellers have decided that whichever one of us they like the best is the one they're going to hire. Maybe Erica and I know that we're in a competitive listing appointment. Maybe we don't. But let's say I go at 2 o'clock and I start having, I do my working with real estate agent disclosure first, right? Okay. And then I start asking the sellers a bunch of questions about what's your zoning? What are your school boards? Is NCDOT going to widen the road? I'm asking the sellers all these questions about their property. Erica's already telling me she has done her research. She knows the zoning. She knows the school board. She knows what NCDOT is going to do. She doesn't have to ask the seller. Who's better prepared, me or Erica? Erica. Who's probably going to get the listing? Erica. Because she did the research, because she learned about the property, because she did the job and gathered the information about the home. She's the expert of her market. She knows the area. She is selling the area, the market. So doing our research, knowing what's going on, before we ever cross the threshold not only it shows that we're doing our job, but it helps us prepare. Maybe once Erica did her research, those were the questions that she had for the seller. I see here that the zoning says blah, 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 but I also know they're talking about changing that zoning. What have you heard? You guys with me? She used her knowledge to help herself at that listing appointment. Anytime you go on a listing appointment, every single time, why don't you guys just always assume that it's a competitive listing appointment and you bring your A game every single time? Everybody with me? It's not a sure deal. Sometimes we got to sell ourselves. We got to prove ourselves to the sellers to get them to hire me. Yes, ma'am, Desiree?
So just a quick question, like sort of kind of off topic, but it isn't. So safety, being a woman in the real estate industry and doing open houses and having people come approaching you off the street, what advice or any experiences you have when it comes to like just being safe, and like when you go out and kind of like do your own research and take a look at the lay of the land, and somebody may stop you because obviously you're not in that area, or like how does your discernment work with that?
That's a great question, Desiree, and I agree. Safety first, always safety first. Except in this class, we're actually going to talk about safety last. So the very last thing we talk about in this class before I send you guys out into the world is safety. We're going to address those things, Desiree. Like, what can we do to make sure that we're protected? What can we do to make sure our sellers protected when we open their houses up for showings and open houses, right? So there's different things to consider and take into place. Your firm probably has safety measures, safety protocols in place, right, to help make sure, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to come home and sit down and have dinner tonight with my husband. And there is no amount of commission that's worth me not coming home tonight and having dinner with my husband. Everybody with me? So great question. I will answer it, but if you don't mind, we're going to wait about a month and a half and we're going to talk about it the very last thing in this class. But it's something, and you're not going to be tested on safety, but it is probably one of the most important topics that we talk about in pre-licensing, is that awareness. Thank you for that, Desiree. So getting ready for the listing, learning much about the home. There's certain documents that we can gather. There's certain documents that the seller can help us gather. These documents are in your book on page 192, 193. Again, I'm not about recreating the wheel when it's right there looking at us. So maybe documents that we can gather, maybe we help, obviously the forms, the agency forms, any contract forms that we need to provide. We can look at stuff online. We can go to the Register of Deeds and pull the current deed. We can go pull the current school board information. We can also get the sellers to help us. Sellers may be able to provide, if the property's in an HOA, for example, they may be able to provide covenants. Sellers, we may ask for a copy of their survey if they have one. Not that we're going to share it with a potential buyer, because we want all buyers to have their own survey. But by looking at the seller survey from when they bought, it can help us better identify the property lines. Are there any easements? That kind of stuff that we're trying to gather, getting ready for the listing. Probably one of the biggest things that we need to ask the seller to gather when we're getting ready to list this property is their outstanding liens. Liens. We need the seller to get those approximate balances. There's actually a place in our listing agreement that asks the seller to list their approximate balance. And guys, if they have multiple mortgages, if they have multiple loans, first mortgage, second mortgage, maybe a third mortgage, when all those liens start adding up, we need to be paying attention to our little red flag. Because if they owe more than what I can sell their house for, that seller is considered underwater, and they may have to bring money to the closing table. So having this conversation, and look, this can get difficult. I mean, for goodness sakes, I just met you and I'm already saying, what are your outstanding balances? How much do you owe on this property? But let me ask you guys something. Would you rather have the hard conversation up front, the awkward conversation up front, or wait until the day before closing and call your seller and they say, I can't afford to bring that kind of money? What do you guys want to do? Everybody say, have it up front, right? Look them in the eye and say, we got to start talking about how much you owe so we can make sure that you can afford to sell. Again, that's covered in our listing agreement, which is very helpful to have that tool. Usually when people see it in writing, then it becomes legit. It's not Julie being nosy asking about your debt, right? Now it's legit because it aids in whether or not you can sell your home. So as we're getting more and more ready, we're getting closer and closer to our first meeting. And this slide, we're going to proceed with caution on this slide because the book indicates that at the first meeting, we do that working with real estate agent disclosure. And the reason why I want to proceed with caution, remember, we do the working with real estate agent disclosure at first substantial contact. Could you have hit first substantial contact when the seller called you to schedule the listing appointment? Could they call you, you pick up the phone and they say, I want to sell because my husband's relocating within 6 months and we got to go out of state. Did you hit first substantial contact before your first meeting? Yes. So we're always on alert for first substantial contact. Now, assuming the seller calls you and says, I want to talk to you about listing, can you come over tomorrow at 5? Have we hit first substantial contact? Not yet. But guess what? When I go over there at 5 tomorrow, before I do anything else, what do I need to do? Sit down and do my disclosure, because there's a really good chance in our hour listing appointment that that seller or I are going to bump on first substantial contact. So again, this isn't a fine science. We need to be on alert. I'm telling you guys, sellers are proud. Guys, to the seller, this is their home. Their home. Blood, sweat, and tears went into this. Remember when little Johnny fell right there and scraped his knee? Oh, they have emotions. They have stories. It's their home. To everybody else in the world, it's just a house. So when you go to the sellers for the listing appointment, they're proud. And one of the first things they want to do is give you the grand tour. Before they do that, you need to be in control. You need to slow it down. And you need to say, let's sit at the kitchen table or the dining room table or the living room, wherever. Let's sit down and have a discussion and do your disclosure and make sure the seller knows that while they don't have to disclose material facts, we do. So as they're walking through the home going, this is broken, that's fixed, and this leaked, and da-da-da-da-da, they should have that knowledge that I have to disclose before they start sharing that stuff with me. Does this make sense to everybody? Isn't that only fair? Instead of the seller saying, this is broke, this is broke, this is broke. Well, if you hire me, I got to tell it because it's a material fact. Is the seller going to hire me? Maybe not. I might have been deceptive. So you need to be in control of this. And if you haven't had that conversation about, in working with real estate, that confidentiality and material facts, be in control, sit them down and have this conversation first before we continue. Again, big part of that disclosure is making sure they understand that I don't owe them that confidentiality until and if they decide to hire me. So back to our previous example, they hired Erica. They didn't hire me, did they? They hired Erica, rightfully so. Do I owe them confidentiality? They hired Erica. Does Julie owe them confidentiality? No. So what if Erica lists the property and then I have an interested buyer client? Where's my loyalty? To the buyer. And if I didn't caution the seller about that, do they not feel a little deceived? Because I didn't mention that in my listing appointment when we first met. That's the whole point of the working with real estate agent disclosure. Thank you, Erica, for letting me pick on you. So pre-listing activities, first meeting, again, we're always on alert for that first substantial contact. Maybe it happens on the phone, maybe it happens when you get to the house. Either way, we need to make sure that we're doing it very, very early, or early on in the relationship before we hit that first substantial contact. So now we've got the listing. Maybe it's the first meeting. Maybe you go to the listing appointment and they say, gee, you're really good. Where do I sign? Maybe they say, we need to think about it and get back to you. And they call you in 2-3 days and say, okay, now we're ready to hire you. Again, there's no science to this. Either way, you've gotten the listing. Celebrate the small wins. Yay, you got the listing. You're one step closer to getting a commission, aren't you? So you've gotten the listing. Now we can really start gathering information about the property. We want to go through with the sellers and inspect the property. We want to bring our listing data sheet. We looked at a sample MLS input sheet the other day. We'll refresh that and look at that again. But the listing data sheet allows me to go through the home and gather information about the property. So when I list it, I can promote the features. I can talk about the good stuff. I know this sounds awful, and I get some funny looks when I say this, but I'm in truth mode today. After a while, after you've seen enough homes, they kind of all start running together. And if you've shown and done open houses and you've been with buyers and sellers and you've seen a cajillion properties, they all start running together after a while. And if you're not going through this home with that data sheet, you may get home and say, gosh, was it that home that had the really cool ceiling fan in the living room? Or was that another home? You guys with me? So the data sheet kind of helps you to be specific about this property, this listing, as you're going through with the seller. We want to ask the seller questions, some of the hard questions. Not only how much money do you owe, what's your outstanding balance or your outstanding balances, but we also want to ask, have you had any recent renovations or repairs? I want to ask this for a couple reasons. First off, I want to make sure there's no mechanic out there waiting to get paid. I want to make sure any recent renovations have been paid. I also want to make sure that I'm properly disclosing any unpermitted spaces. How do we find out? We ask questions. Did your little red flag go up when you walked into the finished basement? When you walked into the room that looks like it has, you know, newer paint than the others? Ask questions. We also need to ask if they're on public sewer and on-site septic. Who remembers how many human heartbeats per bedroom for an on-site septic? On-site septic says 2 human heartbeats per bedroom. So if it's on an on-site septic, I need to get my hands on the marketing plan. Not the marketing plan. I'm sorry. I need to get my hands on the septic permit. And I need to know how many bedrooms I can advertise. If it's on a public sewer, there are no restrictions. There are no limitations. Sellers may not know. Are you on a public sewer or on-site septic? I don't really know. Okay, let me see your water bill. Let me see your most recent water bill. If they're on public sewer, they're paying for it. So we can help them identify. If they don't have a permit, an on-site septic permit, have them contact the county health department. We can get the process starting to get that on-site septic permit. We need to discuss our marketing plan with the seller. How do I plan to market? Am I going to put it online? Am I going to put it in the newspaper? Am I going to do an open house? What am I going to do to market, get word out? This might be something else that sets us apart, right? Back to me, Erica and I in our competitive listing. I may have looked at that seller and say, I'll put it on the internet. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Whereas Erica probably got into detailed information. I put it into MLS and it goes out to thousands of websites. In addition to that, I have a network community with my firm that we can share our listings. Plus I promote it here and I put it on my social media. Again, who sounds better? Me saying, I'll just do it, trust me, or Erica actually getting into the details, the specifics about how she's going to sell your home? Kind of a no-brainer between Erica and I, isn't it? And then we're going to talk about how we can determine square footage. We're going to spend some time talking about square footage. I don't think I'll get to it today, but we know we'll have that to look forward to on Thursday. There's certain requirements for determining square footage, what I can and cannot include in our total heated square foot. So we'll get a little bit more into that, whether or not you're going to measure or have somebody measure for you, pay somebody to measure for you. We'll get a little bit more into that. So please just hang on to that for the time being. Any questions? Working just with sellers. I hope what you're hearing me say as the listing agent, a big part of our job is done up front before the consumer ever sees it for sale on Zillow. A lot of our work as the listing agent is researching and learning about the property and gathering the information. So when we do put it out there for the world, it is accurate, it is full of information. Big part of the listing agent's job is before you ever see it for sale online. Starting on page 194, you have a sample listing agreement. Do not look at the listing agreement in your book. That listing agreement is out of date. So when we look at the listing agreement on Thursday, we're going to go straight to the online learning system. I got the current for you guys there. So every time you see a form in your book, never look at the one in your book. Always go to the online learning system. So skip ahead with me, fly ahead to page 204. And we've talked about how we can earn our commission, connecting buyer and seller. We said, as the listing agent, you're affiliated with the firm that the seller hired. You were the one that the firm allowed to work with their seller. Earning your fee as a buyer's agent is very similar. Your firm may allow you to collect a retainer fee from your buyer. A retainer fee is like a flat amount up front. Pay me in advance for the gas I'm getting ready to put on my car, the wear and tear on my tires. That stuff ain't cheap today, is it? Gas, tires, that stuff is not cheap. So some agents, some firms allow them to collect a retainer fee up front. If we go to closing, that retainer fee will be deducted from the commission. You've already paid it once, so I'm not going to make you pay it again. If we don't make it to closing, then you've been paid a little bit of money to help in your costs, help in your expenses. Again, the firm's policy has to allow it. The real estate commission says we cannot collect or attempt to collect a retainer fee on an oral buyer agency agreement. So if you want to collect a retainer fee, we're getting our buyer agency agreement in writing. The success fee is what we get paid when it closes. We earn it when we connect buyer and seller. We actually get paid if and when it closes. How much are you going to charge your buyer? It's up to your firm's policy. I think this is another problem topic, so I want to say it now so you can hear me say it again on Thursday. There's only two parties to this sales transaction, isn't there? There's only two parties. We're connecting the buyer and the seller. Everybody with me so far? Two parties to the transaction. Our listing agreement says if the seller hires a firm, they pay the listing firm. The listing firm shares their commission with whomever brings the buyer. So you pay me X amount, I'm going to share with whomever brings the buyer. If the seller doesn't hire a firm, if the seller's unrepresented, the seller's a for sale by owner, they may or may not pay the commission. They may or may not pay the buyer's agent. If the for sale by owner does not pay the buyer's agent's commission, who's left in the transaction? Seller has said no. So who's left to pay you? The buyer. Our buyer's agency agreement says, I will always ask the seller to pay me first. But if they can't or won't, you're up, Mr. Buyer, because it's the only other party to the transaction. If the seller's not going to pay you, then the buyer has to. And that's what our buyer's agency agreement says. I'm always going to ask the seller first. I owe that to my buyers. I'm always going to ask the sellers first. But if they can't or won't, then the buyer has to pay me. And that's where our success fee comes from. Again, we'll see that. We should get to our listing, our buyer's agency agreement on Thursday as well. Buyer's agency agreements on 205 in your book. Again, that's an outdated form. So just skip that and make sure you're always looking at the online learning system. License law 93A-6 addresses our commission. Commission rule 58A.0102 addresses our commission. So I got a law and a rule about our commission. Again, I just have them here for reference. The license law says that we cannot collect commission from anyone other than our affiliated broker in charge. So can your seller make a side deal with you to pay you a bonus of $500? We'll just bypass the firm and pay you this referral fee or this bonus directly. Can they do that? Well, I mean, they can try. Can we accept it? License law says no. All monies have to run through the firm. Remember, whose agency agreement is it? It's not yours. It is the firm's. Are you going to get that whole bonus, or is the firm going to make you split it with them? I don't know. All firms are different. They all have a different policy on how they handle commission. So 93A-6, again, that's the license law and disciplinary action. That's what's in the Campbell folder that I have for you guys. The other one, Commission Rule 58A.0102. 0120, there it is just addressing disclosure of our compensation, making sure all parties know, our clients know the monies we stand to make in this transaction. Reiterating the fact that I can't be paid from anybody other than my supervising, my affiliating broker in charge firm. We'll talk more about that when we get into license law and commission law. So on page 211, picking back up there, talking a little bit more about our fees. You know, how we get paid may depend on what type of transaction it is. A co-brokered sale means it's two different firms. One firm has been hired to work with the seller, and a different firm has been hired to work with the buyer. How much as a buyer's agent or a seller sub-agent you're going to get for this transaction has got to be advertised in our local MLS, multiple listing services. Not only does MLS allow us to create inventory, to pool all of our listings together, to have an inventory, but it also serves as an offer of compensation. So when you have a buyer interested, you're not going to see this on the public sites, but you can log into MLS. You have a buyer interested in 123 Main Street, and you can look at 123 Main Street in MLS and see how much the listing firm is going to pay you when you bring them that ready, willing, and able buyer. And if what the listing firm is offering is advertising in MLS, if it's not what your firm expects to collect, then we get the balance, we get the difference from the buyer. There are only two parties to this transaction. So if the seller's not willing to pay what the firm expects to collect, then our buyer agency agreement says we'll get it from the buyer. I had buyers. Remember I told you guys I'm a little naive sometimes. I know this about myself. And I had buyers once interested in a property, and I went in MLS to look it up, to start gathering information to learn about it. And I looked at the commission that they were going to offer me if I brought them a ready, willing, and able buyer. And the commission advertised in MLS was 0.5%. 0.5%. Now, I'm not going to tell you what my firm expects to collect when working with buyers, but I will tell you it's more than 0.5%. Are you kidding me? 0.5. That was their agency agreement. That was the relationship that they had with that seller. I'm naive. I called the listing agent and said, I think I found a typo in your listing. To which she said, no, that's what my seller's willing to pay you. Is 0.5% cut it? No. So what was my very next call? Who's left in the transaction? To my buyer. This is how much the seller's willing to pay me. If you proceed with this transaction and buy this house, you owe me the difference. You will have to pay that difference. And guys, I had that conversation before we ever pulled in the driveway because I needed them to understand before they walked in the front door and fell in love with the house. Because once they walk in the front door and they say, oh my God, this is it. This is my dream home. And you start babbling on about commission, you're just background noise at that point. So I made sure they understood. Now, luckily they weren't interested and we pretty much walked in the front door and turned around and walked right back out. But 0.5% is not enough, but that's all they were willing to pay me to bring the seller. So they're bring the buyer. So again, if the seller's not willing to pay you at all, or pay you what your firm expects to collect, who's the only other party to the transaction? Who's the only other person you can get paid from? The buyer. So the listing agreement, the seller agrees to pay the listing firm. The listing firm agrees to share their commission with whomever brings the buyer. Co-broke transactions. How do you get paid in an in-house sale? Well, it depends on the firm's policy. It's got to be spelled out. Remember, I told you guys, look at that independent contractor agreement before you sign. That compensation plan, you should see that, the compensation structure. Are you going to get paid more or less for an in-house sale, an in-house transaction? Can't really answer that because it's up to your firm's policy. And then the last scenario for getting paid, we may agree, two firms may agree to co-list a property. So you may have two firms acting as the listing agent if the firm's policy allows. Again, how are we going to share that commission in a co-list? Will just come down to both firms' policies. Both firms have to agree how much to charge the seller and how they're going to share. You know, I think a couple good examples of when and why we might co-list something. There's some kind of gray areas within our MLSs. So for example, Burlington, Witsit, that kind of area, that may fall in the Triad MLS. It may also fall in the Triangle MLS. It's kind of that gray area. And the seller may choose, the seller may want to hire two firms, one within Triad and one within Triangle. And if the firms agree, we could co-list it. It's more exposure for the seller. We can offer more cooperation for the individual agents, the individual brokers. Another time I've seen two firms come together and co-list is a high-end luxury property. Like think like $10 million plus. I don't know about you, but I'm okay with sharing my commission on a $10 million listing. Anybody else with me? Again, it's about, look at y'all like, yeah, absolutely. But it's all about exposure. Again, it's all up to the firm's agreements. Questions on splitting a fee? Bottom line, it all comes down to the firm's policy. Starting on page 211, we talk about different types of listing agreements. We got several different types just to keep things fun and keep us on our toes. So we got a couple different types of listing agreements. We'll probably get started on this today. We won't get finished, but at least we'll get started on it. The first type of listing agreement is something called an open listing. An open listing is non-exclusive, which means how many firms can the seller date? As many as they want. They can play the field, can't they? Open listings are non-exclusive, which means we have multiple agents. But guess what? Only the one that brings the buyer is the one that's going to get paid. May that be one of the agents that listed it. May that be an agent from a different firm. The only one to get paid is the selling agent, the one that brings the buyer. Oh yeah, and the seller retains the right to sell it on their own and not pay anybody. So let's say the seller's at work. They list their property with 5 agents, 5 firms, and they're at work and they're in the break room. And they tell a coworker in the break room, yeah, we just listed our house. And that coworker says, oh my God, I've always loved your neighborhood. I would love to buy your house. Did the agent do anything? Probably not. So guess what? The seller's argument could be, I sold my own house, so I'm not going to pay anybody. Now I see some of the looks I'm getting from you guys. Y'all want the good news? These usually are not allowed. Usually. For example, in the Triad MLS, these are prohibited. I've never, ever seen one of these. Obviously, there's still a thing somewhere. I don't really know where, but there's still a thing somewhere because we're talking about it. But I think these were more common back in the day before the internet. And we couldn't just put it in MLS and feed it out to thousands of websites. We all had to do our own marketing, our own advertising. And I think the internet eliminated most of these open listings. Again, they still got to be somewhere. Obviously, we're still talking about it. But I don't know. This got out of my MLS, and I'm not familiar with who or what or where could allow it. For exam purposes, there you go. For exam purposes, but pretty much to your point, once you get your license, you'll probably never hear about an open listing again. Is that good news? Does that make us feel a little bit better? I was seeing the side looks I was getting. Are you kidding me? I could list with 4 other people and possibly not get paid. I saw you. And an open listing, that's exactly what I'm saying. You could list it and not get paid because the only one that's going to get paid is if they bring the seller. Nope, the buyer. Another listing agreement we have is something called the exclusive agency listing. Exclusive meaning now how many firms is the seller dating? Now the seller's just dating one firm. So we've honed it in a little bit, but guess what? The one that brings the buyer is the one that's going to get paid. So if you list it, you're the only one to list it. But if somebody else brings the buyer, then they're going to get paid. And the seller still retains the right to sell it in the break room without you. Great question comes in. Are owners familiar with the proper paperwork to use? No, that's our job to know what paperwork to use. Your firm's policy will probably tell you what listing agreement they want you to use. So exclusive agency is a little bit better. There's just one agent, but you're still only going to get paid if you bring the buyer. A little bit better, right? Got a better chance of getting paid. Again, I can only speak for the Triad MLS. And I will tell you guys, in the Triad MLS, these are allowed. However, in my 22 years, I've never ever seen one out in the wild. Are they out there? Possibly. I'm sure some firm will allow it, but I've never ever seen one. So what's the one we see the most? What's the one that we like? That's called the exclusive right to sell. Exclusive meaning how many firms? Just one. And guess what? You get paid no matter where the buyer comes from. You bring the buyer, you get paid. An agent in a different firm brings a buyer, you get paid. The seller sells it in the break room. Guess what? You get paid. Do we like this one? Yay, we found the winner. This is the one that we use the most often. This is the one, only one that I've ever seen. This is the form that we're going to look at on Thursday. So 3 different agency agreements. And as somebody said it beautifully, why do we care about this? Because you could see a test question. This very well could be one of these things that once you get your license, you never deal with anything other than exclusive right to sell listing agreement again. Just got to get you through the tests. Fair enough? I think sometimes you get in your own way. I'm not doing an open listing. Well, that's good. I hear you. I still got to get you through the test. So I'm going to end here. Obviously, it's time, 12:59 for today. So we're going to end here. When we come back on Thursday, when we come back on Thursday, we're going to pick back up. We'll do a refresher on the different agencies so we can start kind of where we left off. And then we're going to look at our exclusive right to sell listing agreement. I'm not going to stand here and read it to you guys, but I am going to kind of point out some of the highlights. It is in the Unit 8 material in the online learning system. So if you want to go ahead and start looking at it, that's fine. We'll talk about it. We'll get most of the way through Unit 8 on Thursday. And that's going to include looking at our buyer agency agreement as well, which is on the online learning system. So if you want to look ahead, we may get to commission. We may get to a little bit of it. Your math concepts for Unit 8 starts on page 242. So as you're looking ahead, look at those math concepts so we can help you guys figure out how to calculate your commission. We'll finish Unit 8 next Tuesday. So we still got a little ways to go through that, but that gives you enough to get started and look ahead at. Sound good? That's what I know. Y'all have a great afternoon. Have a good day tomorrow. And we'll see you at 9 a.m. sharp on Thursday.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.